Chapter 1 Big Medicine. Uncle, I've practiced the Jade Sword True Understanding for half a year, yet my sword chi still cannot kill enemies. In a dilapidated courtyard, a 15 or 16-year-old boy was seeking advice from a burly man. The burly man raised his thick eyebrows and said, "Didn't I tell you that within 3 days of practice, you had produced your first breath of true chi, and 3 days later, your first strand of sword chi, a rare sword Tao genius one might find merely in 10,000? Yes, uncle, you indeed said so half a year ago. Having lived a life of poverty and enduring humiliations, the youth, who couldn't even muster the courage to confess to his childhood sweetheart, could only watch as she married someone else, desperate for this swordsmanship to change his life. Then show me a finger sword strike," said the burly man. "All right." The boy lowered his left arm and extended his index finger. A divine sword unsheathed, thrusting forward. A streak of white sword chi burst forth from the fingertip, an impressive sight. Facing the incoming white sword chi, the burly man was unperturbed, standing still without moving an inch. There was a light snap sound. The sword chi made only a tiny indentation on the man's clothes before vanishing in an instant. The boy showed a frustrated expression, saying, "Half a year, and this sword chi can only brush off a bit of dust." The burly man laughed heartily. "That's because the Jade Sword True Chi in your body is too weak. To train it into true Jade Sword True Chi, you must fill the insubstantial with the substantial." The boy asked eagerly, "Uncle, how do I fill the insubstantial with the substantial?" "You need to take medicine." "What kind of medicine?" "Big medicine." "What kind of big medicine?" The boy looked at the burly man's broad and intense face, eyes brimming with hope. "Medicine like this." Saying so, the burly man, like the boy, extended the index finger of his left hand and thrust forward. A jet of white sword chi shot out from the fingertip, and with a bang, it pierced the boy's belly. Looking down, the boy saw his abdomen slashed open, with blood gushing out. The boy's eyes filled with confusion, and he said, "Uncle, what are you doing?" The burly man replied earnestly, "You are my big medicine." The burly man struck again with his finger, and this time the sword chi followed the same wound, piercing through the boy's abdomen completely. The boy knelt to the ground, clutching his wound, looking up with eyes full of bewilderment and fear. The previously forthright uncle, still smiling cheerfully, was indistinguishable from the heroes described in leisurely tales. How he wished this was just a nightmare. He had yet to master the sword, yet to kill those who had insulted him, yet to kill May's husband and his entire family, and take May. At this moment, another uncle of identical appearance walked over. This uncle set up a big pot and started boiling water. "Let's not waste this big medicine." With a thud, the boy practicing swordsmanship was thrown into the boiling pot, struggling, attempting to scream, but his throat produced no sound. The two men who looked identical sprinkled various colorful herbs into the pot. The flames reflected on their faces, making them appear robust and utterly hardy. Dusk, Duan Yun was curled up asleep on the bed, his expression both exhausted and pained. That afternoon, after returning from making house calls, he went to buy some vegetables, only to suddenly be kicked flying. A vegetable-selling auntie who was serving him at the time and a neighboring firewood man were kicked along with him. The ones who kicked them told them to roll out of the way, not to block the road, as the gang leader would be passing by. So Duan Yun could do nothing but grit his teeth and get up. But the auntie was not so quick to rise and took another kick. They treated people like kicking footballs merely because a gang leader was passing by. An unknowing person might even think that it was the emperor passing through. The matter sounds absurd, but it did happen. In this place where the county magistrate is often killed by bandits and makes an embarrassing spectacle of himself, a local martial arts gang's gang leader indeed has the presence of a village emperor. Duan Yun was not one to hold grudges. He only knew that it was the Xuanxiong gang's men who had kicked him. Everyone in the Xuanxiong gang practiced martial arts. The elite members who were successful in their cultivation had palms as wide and thick as bears' paws, capable of killing a person with a single slap. Similarly, these people were often irrationally aggressive, just like uncontrollable bear children. The man who kicked someone nonchalantly today was living proof of this. This is said to be the chronic effect of practicing the Xuanxiong palm. Duan Yun didn't care about these things. He only knew that he felt terrible. That man's kick was very heavy. So heavy that it felt like a ball of fire burning inside his belly, causing him severe pain. At the same time that he was burned with pain, Duan Yun's self-esteem was also scorched. It had been 10 days since he transmigrated here. Before his transmigration, he was a corporate slave, working tirelessly and often being gaslight. After transmigration, though his parents had passed away, he had barely taken over his father's profession and reluctantly became a doctor. Although he was the lowest level and least needed and valued gynecologist, he was still a doctor. Duan Yun thought he would receive some respect, but the reality, after lying down for about an hour, night had completely fallen, and Duan Yun struggled to sit up from the bed. The pain had eased a lot, but the contemptuous gaze of that man, and his ball-kicking style, kept repeating in his mind. Duan Yun was very tired and injured, yet he didn't want to sleep. He couldn't sleep. He still had to train in martial arts. He finally understood that in this violent and humiliating world, neither the medical practitioner's compassionate heart nor a gynecologist was of any use. Only martial arts training could pave a way out. Otherwise, one would merely be slapped or kicked to death at other people's whims, without a shred of dignity. Duan Yun fumbled under his pillow and pulled out a booklet. Written on the cover were 4 characters. Jade Sword True Understanding. He had bought this secret book from an elderly man the day before. The man had said he had an unusual bone structure suitable for cultivation and that they were fated. The price was 1 silver. He bargained with 1/10 of a silver, and to his surprise, the man accepted. Such eagerness to sell usually didn't signify good quality. But sometimes what people lack is just a bit of hope. Thus, he spent 1/10 of a silver, earned over several days of medical visits, on this hope. If previously Duan Yun had thought of practicing medicine just to get by while casually training in martial arts, hoping to change his life as if winning the lottery, today's experience had completely changed his thinking. He saw the importance of practicing martial arts more than ever. With complex and intense emotions, Duan Yun opened the Jade Sword True Understanding that he previously hadn't had time to practice. The Jade Sword True Understanding comprised 4 techniques, with the first one being the Jade Sword Stance, which involved using stance training as a foundation to perform breathing and qi circulation, thereby cultivating a breath of Jade Sword True Qi. This was the starting point of the Jade Sword True Understanding. Without cultivating the Jade Sword True Qi, the subsequent 3 sword techniques would be impossible to master. But Duan Yun was stumped by the first technique. The stance wasn't difficult, similar to practicing horse stance, but the meridian map was a problem. It wasn't that he couldn't recognize the meridian points. As a gynecologist, he had that knowledge. The main issue was that half of the page with the meridian map was smeared with grease, rendering it a blur, impossible to distinguish which meridian it was. He could only blame his haste during medical visits that he hadn't properly inspected the book, proving the point that you get what you pay for. Damn it! Duan Yun's dream of becoming an unparalleled sword god had shattered on the first page, leaving him incredibly frustrated. He was not yet resigned to giving up, lighting an oil lamp, trying to see through the grease stain with the light. Squinting, Duan Yun seemed to finally discern a few acupoints. Shinju Yangshi, Xiabai, hand 3 miles. Duan Yun didn't know whether it was correct or not. This secret book, filled with his life's hopes, would become waste paper if he did not even attempt to try. He found it hard to accept at the moment. Duan Yun decided to give it a try. He was almost kicked to death and still worry about inconsequential things. Following the secret book's descriptions, Duan Yun positioned himself in the stance and started to breathe according to the pattern, exhaling shallowly 9 times and deeply once. Simultaneously, he visualized the breath drawn in by the breathing technique entering his body's meridians, flowing through acupoints such as Shinju and Yangshi. The initial breathing wasn't smooth since Duan Yun's sea of consciousness was not very clear, and he kept thinking about other things. but gradually he entered a meditative state. At that moment, Duan Yun only felt the world was peaceful, and the breath he drew in through his breathing technique flowed through his meridians, gradually sinking into his dantian, disappearing without a trace. He stood there in stance, continuing his breathing regimen, unaware of the passage of time. After an unknown amount of time, suddenly, the stillness of his dantian rippled as if a fish had broken the calm surface of the water. The ripples dispersed, and a breath leapt from the dantian into his meridians. Duan Yun could feel that this breath was entirely different from the air he had been breathing in and out before. He had succeeded. Chapter 2. The Cultivation of Big Medicine. Duan Yun opened his eyes, a surge of ecstatic joy overwhelming him. This was only his first attempt, and he had already succeeded. Duan Yun felt as if he was dreaming in broad daylight. According to the Jade Sword True Understanding, this breath should flow upwards from the dantian, pass through the central, Shinju, and Du meridian, the major meridian, then enter the arms Yangshi, Xiabai, and hand 3 miles acupoints, gradually becoming like a syrup. The true qi that resembles syrup is the Jade Sword True Qi. As soon as that syrupy sensation arises, it signifies the formation of true qi, and he had indeed just achieved it. Could it be that the old man was telling the truth? That I really have an exceptional bone structure and I am a 1-in-a-million sword Dao prodigy? Duan Yun drank a bowl of water to calm his overjoyed heart. Having achieved a victorious start, he chose to press on with the advantage. The true qi he had just now was, after all, too fine. Not to say that he wanted it to be as unruly as a python, but it had to be somewhat thicker. After all, if the true qi is too fine, he might later be ridiculed by his peers as a thin dog. As he continued with his breathing and qi circulation, the flow of true qi within Duan Yun's body became more distinct, at times like a babbling brook. Suddenly, he experienced an illusion, as if there were many people breathing with him, inhaling and exhaling in a rhythm of 9 shallow and 1 deep. These people's faces overlapped, as if they were continuously whispering in secret. Duan Yun opened his eyes to find one lone candle flickering on the table, and everything returned to normal. He couldn't help but wonder, hey, is this because I've been practicing for too long, and my mind is becoming delirious? Almost at the same moment, a pair of twin brothers dozens of miles away opened their eyes, still maintaining the jade sword stance. Both brothers had the appearance of middle-aged men, stocky and burly with a face full of boldness, exuding a sense of gallant chivalry commonly found in the martial world. At this time, the man on the left moved his nose, burped and said, "Brother, it smells so good. We've just finished eating and there is new big medicine already. Not bad talent at all." The man on the right responded, "We can't rush to harvest wild-raised big medicine. It has only just sprouted. Such a fine seedling, we should let it grow for some more time. In due course, we will share it equally, and then we'll break through in one fell swoop. That would be superb. Our chivalrous path will then be all the more smooth. That's a given, ha ha ha." The laughter of spirited voices filled the loft for a moment. Since too much jade sword stance practice had led to hallucinations, Duan Yun decided to unlock the second technique of Jade Sword True Understanding, Water Moon Slash. Water Moon Slash involves channeling the Jade Sword True Qi cultivated within the body through the sword body, creating a shape like a water moon. Simply put, it's a water moon shape of sword qi. Seeing this, Duan Yun became even more certain of the authenticity of this secret book, because these were the notes written in the margins by someone who had practiced this technique and achieved a certain level of mastery. This senior was truly a good person. Once Jade Sword True Qi is cultivated, Water Moon Slash becomes a natural progression. Just extend the qi flow to the Zhongchong and Shaochong acupoints and thrust it out from the sword's edge. Duan Yun said thrust, and thrust he did. But now he had no sword, so he had to make do with a kitchen knife instead. At this moment, Duan Yun took a deep breath, the energy sinking into his dantian, and with a kitchen knife, he swept out. The air in front of him twisted, and indeed a crescent-shaped qi force flew from the blade, colliding with the mud wall a meter away. Holy shit! Duan Yun hurried over, afraid of smashing his wall to pieces. But the result was just a little bit of dust falling. Yes, dust, not dirt. That crescent-shaped chi force broke out from the knife with a visible light and an intimidating momentum, but who could have expected it to be just for show? This shouldn't be the case, Duan Yun muttered. Could the sword chi, unable to kill even a mosquito, even be called sword chi? Duan Yun tried again. This time he applied more force and the sword chi momentarily widened. If the previous sword chi was a crescent, then this time it was a real half-moon. With a da, as the half-moon sword chi passed, the straw curtains of the outhouse slightly caved inward by a line, then returned to normal. Duan Yun, panting, wiped the sweat from his forehead. Still couldn't kill a mosquito. Duan Yun couldn't help but wonder if the reason was that Jade's sword true chi was too subtle and lacked strength. So he returned to practicing the first move, Jade's sword stance, to strengthen his true chi. For 3 consecutive days, Duan Yun devoted himself to arduous practice. The progress of Jade's sword true chi was actually not bad. From the initial thread-like state to the now rushing stream, but water moon sword energy's power didn't change much. Not to mention killing people with sword chi as in the novels, it was even strenuous to slap dust away. Duan Yun didn't know that on the usual path, it's extremely difficult to cultivate a strand of true chi. Even for those with decent talent, it would take at least a few years, and to transform true chi into sword chi would take even longer. In a certain sense, Jade's Sword True Understanding was a secret manual that opened a new path of divine skill, enabling one to cultivate true chi and sword chi first. But the sword chi and true chi cultivated in this way were relatively insubstantial and needed to be solidified. And to solidify them, one needed to take medicinal herbs. What he saw from Jade's Sword True Understanding was actually only half of it, the half that could cultivate true chi and sword chi. The other half described how to treat the sword cultivator, who had cultivated true chi and sword chi, as big medicine and use a unique cultivation technique to completely consume and absorb it. Once the big medicine was absorbed, one could rapidly enhance the power of true chi and sword chi, solidifying what was insubstantial. To motivate the big medicine to diligently cultivate, this Jade Sword True Understanding also included notes encouraging the big medicine to continue cultivation, claiming that focused sword practice for 4 to 5 months would bring changes. 4 to 5 months was when the big medicine was at its most potent, ripe for the harvest. Unfortunately, this secret book that had passed through countless hands had its annotations covered by stains, and Duan Yun couldn't see them clearly at all. He was completely unaware that he was becoming someone else's big medicine. Seeing that the power of the sword chi was hardly improving, although Duan Yun hadn't figured out the trick, he didn't want to give up. He believed he had a notable talent in sword Dao. It made no sense that he had rapidly cultivated true chi and sword chi, but couldn't quickly enhance their power. There must be some problem somewhere. At night, Duan Yun was cooking mapo tofu. Even after traveling to another world, he still enjoyed Sichuan cuisine, with its bold and unreserved flavors. If it lacked freshness, add pork fat. If not spicy enough, add chili. If not numbing enough, Sichuan pepper was to be called upon. As long as the ingredients were used generously, it was hard to make a dish that tasted bad. But what about sword chi? His water moon sword energy was weak. Was it because the ingredients were not used sufficiently? What other ingredients could there be for sword chi? Duan Yun had always been concerned that maybe there was some screw-up on the first page of the secret book, which led to the lack of power in his sword chi. After all, he couldn't see clearly the acupoint map on that page, and some words were also unclear. Outside the window, the cool night was like water, with moonlight scattered in the small courtyard, like frost. All of a sudden, a spark of inspiration flashed through Duan Yun's mind. Moonlight. The second move in Jade Sword True Understanding is called Water Moon Slash. Could this move be related to the moon? Jade's sword stance is based on standing stake exercises, performing breathing to cultivate chi. While breathing, he could clearly feel the surrounding air entering his body and meridians. If air can be breathed in and out, why not moonlight? In the novels, isn't there often mention of absorbing moonlight to cultivate divine skills? Previously, the breathing page was partly covered by grease stains. Perhaps these details were missed. Why not try it out? Just give it a try. After finishing his mapo tofu, Duan Yun was determined to try. During the breathing process, he was no longer rigid about only breathing air. In his time spent breathing, he could already sense many details of the air, such as temperature, humidity, floating pollen, dust, and a particularly pure and clear gas. He could sense that this pure gas was key to forming Jade Sword True Qi. No one taught him what it was, and the secret book didn't mention it. Duan Yun could only understand it in his own way, attributing it to something similar to nature's spiritual energy found in novels. And what about moonlight? Before this, he never paid attention to moonlight and did not know what it was like. But when Duan Yun began to pay attention to it, he discovered that moonlight was cool and moist, like nature's spiritual energy cloaked in a thin frost. So he inhaled it into his body and allowed it to sink into his dantian. Duan Yun, with his eyes closed while standing and breathing, did not see that the moonlight, usually like light, momentarily turned into a milky white liquid that entered his body. Chapter 3. Because I am 1 in 10,000, a sword Tao prodigy. As moonlight continued to be absorbed, Duan Yun noticed a change in his Jade Sword True Qi. If the first time he felt the Jade Sword True Qi, it could be described as like syrup. At this moment, the Jade Sword True Qi had become more substantial. In his consciousness, Duan Yun could even sense that it was white, just like the moonlight's nectar. Duan Yun opened his eyes, picked up the kitchen knife beside him, and made a horizontal slash. With a swish, silvery sword qi spread out like the water moon slash and flew out, only to hear a crisp snap, which startled Duan Yun. On the mud wall, a clear notch appeared, with dust filling the air. This power was several times greater than before. Success. The integration with moonlight made the previously weak sword qi's problem a thing of the past. I truly am a 1 in a million sword Tao prodigy. As long as I use my brain, there's no problem that can stump me. Duan Yun swung 4 more times and discovered that the water moon slash's power had indeed increased greatly. Looking at the sword marks on the wall, his excitement was almost uncontrollable. Practicing sword for 10 days and sword qi breaking walls, this cultivation result isn't too shabby, right? If this sword qi can slice through walls, what effect would it have on a human body? Duan Yun wanted to continue but suddenly found his breathing rough and his arms trembling slightly, after consecutively executing the water moon slash. His body showed signs of exhaustion, and his mind vaguely felt that disordered sensation of many faces overlapping in cultivation. Indeed, what limited him was this mortal frame. Duan Yun chose to rest. Today's progress was too bountiful. In just a few days, he had solved the most crucial problem of his sword qi lacking power. The Xuanxiong gang was formidable because they could turn their hands into bare paws. But even though his sword qi had just begun to manifest, it was already promising. The anxiety that had been hanging over him was gone, and Duan Yun felt deep fatigue, but also immense joy. It was akin to the feeling of going all out studying before the college entrance examination in his previous life and finally getting into the university he wanted, with everything settling into place. This sword practice wasn't busy work after all. Clutching the secret book, Duan Yun fell into a contented sleep. In the middle of the night, he awoke abruptly, alerted by the sound of someone's laughter. Someone had entered the room, a fairly tall person. Duan Yun felt a chill and immediately sat up, on guard. "Who are you?" A flame lit up as the visitor ignited the oil lamp on the table, revealing his face. Duan Yun tensed up and said, "It's you." The person was actually the elite member of the Xuanxiong gang who had kicked him a few days ago. The man smiled, revealing snow-white teeth and bright red gums, and said, "Yes, it's me. What do you want?" A sense of unease gripped Duan Yun's heart. "Of course, to kill you," the man said matter-of-factly. "Why?" Duan Yun asked, puzzled. As they spoke, he was quietly reaching for the kitchen knife under his pillow. "Because you're damn unlucky, that's why." The man suddenly became irate and charged forward, smashing down with a palm. Caught off guard, Duan Yun could only raise his arm to block. But the man's palm was thick and heavy, and even if it wasn't quite a bear's paw, it was at least a tiger's claw, not something he could easily fend off. With a bang, the wooden bed broke, and Duan Yun, together with the bed, crashed heavily onto the floor. He could see stars before his eyes, taste the sweetness of blood in his throat, and feel a sharp pain in his arm. He didn't even notice the blood streaming from his nose. Lying there, Duan Yun painfully asked, "Why? Why? I told you already, because you're unlucky," the man retorted. "A doctor who only treats women. How can he be a proper doctor? How can he not bring bad luck?" Yes, if it were any other doctor in the city, the man might not be so irritable. But what kind of a gynecologist doctor was that? Nonsense. The boss, damn, it makes me reflect every day. Reflect on why that day we didn't snatch any divine iron. Reflect on why we can't beat the martial madmen of the Iron Blood sect. Damn it. I'm reflecting so much I'm going crazy. We of the Xuanqiong gang, who practice the Xuanqiong palm, don't have brains to reflect. And tonight, my reflection suddenly came to a conclusion. It's all because I kicked you, the unlucky B** starred, that day and got bad luck. Without you, how would the martial madman of the Iron Blood sect coincidentally come here and go crazy, making me need to use my brain to reflect? The man was frenzied, as if to vent all his frustrations of the past days on Duan Yun. Yes, if we can't take care of those martial madmen of the Iron Blood sect, how can we not take care of you? Listening to the man's words, Duan Yun couldn't help but grin, showing his teeth stained even redder with fresh blood. What the hell is wrong with this guy? He had long heard that a lot of martial artists are crazy. This damn thing is seriously sick. That day I was just standing there buying vegetables, and this bastard kicked me as if I were a ball. Now that he can't beat someone else, he's taking his anger out on me. He wants my life. This kind of person, one day they can't shit and they might come after your life too. Go to hell. Duan Yun cursed. Seeing this tiny ant dare to talk back, the burly man's face twisted with ferocity as he stretched out his thick, huge palm, attempting to crush Duan Yun's skull. "I'll teach you to talk back." The man sneered viciously, as if he could already see the beautiful sight of the young man's skull being crushed in pain and fear, and a hideous smile spread across his face. But in that instant, a white light, like moonlight, suddenly shone, nearly filling his entire vision. Ugh! The man staggered backward, looking at Duan Yun with an incredulous stare. He felt a chill on his neck, a piercing coldness. That flash of white light had sliced open the skin on his neck. No, not just that. A clear line of blood appeared on his neck, so he hurriedly raised his hand to cover it. But the next moment, another crescent-like white light swept out. 3 fingers from his left hand, which had not been trained to become as solid and tough as his right, fell to the ground. The man from the Xuanqiong gang, who had not immediately used his right hand to cover his neck, was still intent on using it to crush the skull of the young man before him. By the time he realized he should cover it with his right hand, it was already too late. The third white light had already sliced horizontally ahead of him, passing over the distance between the two like a half-moon in transit, completely severing his carotid artery and trachea. Blood gushed out like syrup from the slit and could not be stopped. Some of the blood even entered his lungs through the trachea, making it difficult for him to breathe. Sword chi? Saber energy? The young elite of the Xuanqiong gang stared at the broken sword in Duan Yun's hand, unable to comprehend. How could such a nobody have cultivated such sword and saber energy? He was the youngest and most promising elite of the gang, having only recently cultivated his true chi, while the man before him, a cowardly and useless gynecologist. The young man didn't understand. So he died, with his eyes wide open in death. Duan Yun, coughing, stood up. He felt as if his bones were falling apart, and his throat burned like fire, making him cough up blood. The jade sword true chi inside his body was circulating quickly, bringing a sense of coolness. Without this true chi to fend off the first strike, he might not even have been able to lift his sword, let alone execute the water moon slash. The man in black lay on the ground with his eyes wide open, a rather frightening sight. So Duan unleashed another sword chi on his eyes, shattering his eyeballs. Now that's not scary anymore. Afterward, he searched the man's body and found a silver ingot weighing about 15 taels, and some scattered silver coins, and an iron blood sect badge inscribed with the name Wang Li. So the guy's name was Wang Li. On a night that he was unreasonably targeted for murder, only this bit of silver could soothe his wounded soul. For Duan, who could only earn a few silver coins after several medical visits, this was a significant sum. But now he had killed an elite from the Xuanxiong gang, and they would probably come looking for him soon. What should he do? Run away? He had done nothing wrong. Why should he be the one to run? Duan was upset by this notion. If he could kill one, then he could kill two. He had decided even if he had to run, he wouldn't run far. Once he had fully mastered the Jade Sword True Understanding, he would make sure to eradicate every last one of the Xuanxiong gang. Only then would his heart be satisfied. By then, he would no longer need to run. Duan practiced the sword for a life of dignity. If practicing the sword still meant he had to hide like a mouse, that would have all been in vain. Duan had made his decision. He would make the Xuanxiong gang disappear before the weather turned cold. What gave him such confidence? Because he is a 1-in-a-million sword Dao prodigy. Chapter 4 Ghost? Duan rested for a while, and then dug a hole under the crooked tree in the courtyard, and buried the body of the Xuanxiong gang man called Wang Li. After finishing these tasks, it was still dark, and Duan was very tired and sleepy, so he went to sleep. In the early morning, Duan woke up, took a cold bath, and changed into a clean pair of underwear. Last night was the first time he killed and buried someone, and he thought he would have nightmares. But surprisingly, he had a sensual dream. It was even with the paper doll wife he liked in his previous life. Reincarnated and still horny. What a shame. Afterward, Duan had breakfast and prepared to flee. The palm strike he received last night was heavy. He thought he would suffer fractures and internal injuries, but his wounds healed faster than he expected. Aside from some lingering pain in his arm, he was largely unimpeded. It seemed to be the result of Jade Sword True Chi and his uniquely structured bones. Duan only took silver, the secret book, a kitchen knife, and some personal clothes with him. He packed the clothes and kitchen knife in a medicine box, which made it look like he was going out for medical visits. When leaving, he wrapped a strand of hair around the door lock. Now, with the dropped silver from the deceased, Duan had a budget to buy a sword. Last night, the kitchen knife somewhat impeded the release of sword chi. A sword Dao genius emitting sword chi with a kitchen knife wasn't cool, and it also reduced its power. So, Duan planned to first visit a weapons shop to buy a sword for self-defense. Walking on the road, Duan observed all around him, listening intently. He had heard a few days ago that Xuanxiong gang had started fighting with Iron Blood Sect. It was said that the masters of Iron Blood Sect have green blood in their bodies. Now, what he hoped most was that Xuanxiong gang and Iron Blood Sect were so preoccupied with fighting each other that they wouldn't have the energy to pursue him. However, when buying the sword, he learned that the people from the Iron Blood Sect had run away. Duan was surprised. They ran away? The Iron Blood Sect members practice blood refinement so much that they inevitably feel constrained some days of the year and want to find someone to fight to let out some blood. Once enough blood has been let, they naturally leave, explained the weapons store owner. Duan was speechless. That's just quitting halfway through. With Iron Blood Sect gone, Lishui City was still ruled by the Xuanxiong gang. Duan felt the crisis and finally bought a sword for 13 taels of silver. A sword of ordinary design and craftsmanship. It was not what he had expected. Initially, he hoped for a sword that was handy, durable, and ideally a bit stylish. Later, he didn't care whether it was stylish, as long as it was handy and durable. Even later, he didn't care about it being handy. As long as it was durable and a sword, that was enough. It felt somewhat like having an insufficient budget for a bathhouse and then only being able to order the cheapest package without any chance of adding extra time. No wonder swords are damn expensive. No wonder in the martial world, those who wield swords are mostly elegant young masters. because the poor can't afford swords. After buying a sword, Duan Yun also bought some roasted cakes and left the city. On the way, he encountered a group of Xuanxiong gang members eating noodles by the roadside, giving him a scare. After leaving the city, Duan Yun looked back at Lishui town. It was just dawn, with smoke curling up from the households, river mist drifting along the river by the city, and Duan Yun deeply felt the heartache of not being able to return home. He was not vindictive, but this feeling he remembered. Once he mastered his swordsmanship, he would definitely make Xuanxiong gang pay double. Lishui city was relatively secluded, with few people on the main road outside the city, let alone the small path Duan Yun chose. The path was hidden all right, but as Duan Yun walked on, he realized he had taken a wrong turn. Originally, he wanted to go to Qingsong Market, 70 miles away from Lishui city to avoid trouble, which would also facilitate wiping out the whole Xuanxiong gang within a day once his swordsmanship was accomplished. But now it was completely dark, and he hadn't found a place to stay. At night, Duan Yun made a fire in a wasteland. Dry roasted cakes were placed over it for a while before he started eating them with water from a gourd. He thought about hunting some wild game, as there was a wild chicken nearby that he had taken down with his sword chi. But there was no stream around to easily clean a bloody chicken, so it was simpler to just eat some roasted cakes. It looked like tonight he was destined to spend the night in the wilderness. In TV dramas, swordsmen spending the night in the wilderness looked rather romantic, warming themselves by a fire, and unleashing sword chi when facing injustice. But all Duan Yun felt now was loneliness and solitude, even a hint of fear. On his way here, in the woods up ahead, he had seen several broken tombstones. Although this place had a path, it was adjacent to graves, with the wind making the trees shake, occasionally accompanied by the cries of night owls, truly like the scene of a horror film. Yes, he had no idea where this road led, and he hadn't encountered a single soul along the way. In such a place, it was not advisable to sleep easily, so Duan Yun could only start practicing his arts. Duan Yun opened the secret book, and aided by the firelight, he focused on reading. Whenever he started practicing his swords, no matter how troubled he was before, he could quickly calm down and immerse himself. Today, he wanted to try the third technique from Jade Sword True Understanding. The third technique of Jade Sword True Understanding was called Jade Sword Finger, apparently a finger technique. At that moment, Duan Yun lowered his left arm, stretched out his index finger, and started circulating Jade Sword True Chi as per the instructions in the secret book. His index finger was tense straight, appearing strong and potent, like an unsheathed divine sword. The next moment, he jabbed forward with the sword finger, but there was no reaction. Duan Yun jabbed again, still no response. Logically speaking, the Jade Sword Finger and Water Moon Slash are similar techniques. Both release the Jade Sword True Chi from specific acupoints in the body. On his third attempt, before rushing, Duan Yun loosened his fingers to calm his emotions. He settled his chi in the dantian, and the Jade Sword True Chi successively flowed through acupoints like Hand 5 miles, Pianyang, and Shangyang. Then he thrust forward. A white light burst out from his fingertips. With a bang, the white light penetrated the ground, leaving an invisible hole. Duan Yun raised his hand and thrust again. With a bang, the white light sword chi penetrated a wild tree ahead, sending splinters flying. Duan Yun walked over to see that although the tree wasn't large, only about half a foot thick, it was easily punctured. Why does this feel so much like the 6th Meridian Divine Sword used by the Duan family? Duan Yun pondered upon seeing this. In his past life, after watching the 8 trigrams of the Heavenly Dragon TV series, even at a young age he had several lofty life goals. Marry Lu Yifei.
Marie Yiangxin.
Master the exclusive 6th Meridian Divine Sword of the Duan family. As he grew older, he gave up on the first 2 relatively achievable goals due to his preference for a 2-dimensional wife, and completely abandoned the third. Unexpectedly, by a slip of fate, he managed to achieve the most challenging goal. It seems that the Duan family's finger technique does have an added bonus. Duan Yun continuously performed the Jade Sword Finger 2 more times, Watching the trees being effortlessly penetrated, he felt a thrill similar to playing a shooting game. Now, he could use the Jade Sword Finger with his left hand to penetrate enemies and the Water Moon Slash with his right hand for ranged attacks. Both combined, the power was formidable. Annihilating the Xuanxiong gang seemed just within reach. Yes, what he lacked now was the thickness of true qi. He was ambushed last night, and after slashing out 4 Water Moon Sword energies, he nearly exhausted half of his true qi. Considering how many members the Xuanxiong gang had, he would need to be able to slash out hundreds of Water Moon Sword energies and release hundreds of Jade Sword Fingers to truly revel in the battle. His Jade Sword true qi, from none to now a trickle, could at present continuously perform about 10 Water Moon Sword energies or 20 times the Jade Sword Finger. This took him roughly 10 days. To increase it tenfold, he would need 100 days. That was still too slow. He needed to intensify his efforts. Duan Yun decided, once he found a place to settle, to diligently practice the Jade Sword true qi. Once his true qi was robust, he could indeed pierce each member of the Xuanxiong gang thoroughly, and when facing multiple enemies, directly slay them with the Water Moon Sword energy. Just thinking about it was both exhilarating and satisfying. Now that the Jade Sword Finger was mastered, only the last technique, Embrace Sparrowtail, was left in the Jade Sword True Understanding. Traditionally, the last technique in the secret book should be the strongest. After performing the Jade Sword Finger several times, about half of Duan Yun's Jade Sword True Qi was depleted, and his arms felt a bit sore, as if he overexerted them. But he had experience, and knew his arms would gradually adapt to the intensity and frequency. After all, it was just a lack of practice. More practice would be better. Thus, without stopping, Duan Yun started practicing the final style, Embrace Sparrowtail. As Duan Yun carefully studied the secret book, he found that Embrace Sparrowtail was indeed the most complex of the 4 moves. While circulating true qi and forming finger mudras, it also required visualizing the image of Jade Sword Immortal. The depictions of the Jade Sword Immortal in the secret book were simple and lacked details, but they still managed to capture the spirit, showing the image of a graceful female sword immortal. Duan Yun quickly memorized it. He was a sword Dao prodigy, and memorizing the image of a Jade Sword Immortal was easy for him. Under the moonlight, Duan Yun crossed his hands and formed mudras. The appearance of the Jade Sword Immortal instantly emerged in his sea of consciousness, blossoming like a lotus from water. Embrace Sparrowtail. In an instant, true qi as radiant as moonlight burst forth from Duan Yun, forming a vague image of the Jade Sword Immortal behind him. Duan Yun changed his finger techniques, but the image of the Jade Sword Immortal behind him remained still. Logically, at this time, the Jade Sword Immortal should also be changing finger techniques just like him. Duan Yun tried several times, but the Dharma image did not respond. Huff! Duan Yun let out a long breath, and the Dharma image behind him dissipated. Condensing this Dharma image consumed a significant amount of true qi. It must be an issue with the secret book, not a problem on my part, Duan Yun speculated. Meeting an obstacle on the 4th technique, Embrace Sparrowtail, the 1 in 10,000 sword Dao prodigy, Duan Yun, was not anxious. His previous experience had taught him that with his sword Dao talent and supreme wisdom, he should be able to quickly resolve this issue. Besides, just mastering the first 3 techniques, if done properly, should be enough for him to settle scores with the Xuanxiong gang. Duan Yun practiced the Jade Sword stance for another half an hour until the moon disappeared into the clouds, concluding his practice for the day. Today had been another day of fleeing and practicing swordsmanship, and he was quite tired. Duan Yun added some firewood, then leaned against a tree and tried to take a nap. However, he didn't sleep well, intermittently swatting his ear in annoyance, even releasing a burst of sword qi. The mosquitoes were too aggressive. This being his first time sleeping outdoors, the carefree and romantic experience depicted in martial arts TV shows, where one falls asleep under the stars, was completely absent. In a semi-conscious state, Duan Yun drifted off to sleep, hearing buzzing sounds around his ears. At that moment, a cold breeze blew by, causing the already weak flames to flicker erratically. Duan Yun felt chills on his skin and wrapped his clothes tighter around him. Just then, his body suddenly froze in place. The flickering firelight illuminated a bit below the muddy slope. A woman in red stood there. It was near the site of the grave Duan Yun had passed earlier. The woman in red stood at the edge of the wilderness, her face obscured in the dim surroundings, but Duan Yun felt that she was staring right at him. A bone-chilling sensation crawled over Duan Yun's body. A ghost? Chapter 5 The Fairy Descends to the Mortal World. The red-dressed woman stood silently at the edge of the graves, evoking an immense sense of horror. Duan Yun previously felt like he was in a horror film setting, but hadn't prepared for a ghostly encounter in the dead of night. And it was a vicious spirit clad in red, no less. Just what kind of world was this? Duan Yun wasn't too sure. Having crossed over for less than a month, he only knew that in the relatively isolated Lishui town, the members of the Xuanxiong gang could train their hands as big and solid as bear paws, and the elites of the Iron Blood sect bled green blood, which made the whole martial world seem anything but ordinary. Who's to say there really aren't ghosts in a place like this? Was his first night spent in the wilderness supposed to be this thrilling? Duan Yun pretended not to have awakened and didn't move, but what troubled him was that the female ghost had moved. The ghost floated towards him, her light and transparent red dress like smoke and mist in the night, and Duan Yun could clearly see the exquisite curves beneath. Lad, stop pretending. You've seen me. The woman's feet landed on a tree branch, soundlessly, as she spoke languidly. Her voice was so sweetly seductive that it made one's bones tingle. If it weren't for the lack of any signs of life from her, which seriously made him suspect she had just crawled out of a grave, he might consider her to be a stunning beauty. Indeed, the woman had dignified features and a graceful figure that would be considered top-notch beauty both before and after his transmigration. She'd still be a sight to behold even laid in a coffin. But Duan Yun did not have such peculiar tastes, and so he nervously said, "I apologize for the intrusion, as I've nowhere to stay at this late hour. I will be sure to burn more gold and silver ingots to atone to the lady in the future." Hearing Duan Yun's words, the woman couldn't help but giggle. "You don't think I'm a ghost, do you?" She came alive with the breath of life when she laughed, making her appear radiant and lively. Duan Yun said, "Then, lady, you are?" "I'm a fairy from the heavens. I just happened to see a fire here in the dead of night, so I've come out of kindness to relieve your loneliness." The red-dressed woman was partially undressed, revealing skin as smooth and white as snow. Duan Yun hesitated. "But a fairy isn't supposed to." "I know what you're thinking," she cooed, swinging her slender legs. "A fairy should indeed be pure and lofty high above, but what if a fairy were to fall to the mortal realm? A fairy's fall is bound to bring about some changes." For a moment, Duan Yun found her argument very reasonable, difficult to refute. "The night is long. Let your concubine come and embrace you to dispel the loneliness." With that, the woman floated down from the tree. She looked at Duan Yun as if she wanted to devour him. At the same time, her red dress had slipped to the ground, exuding a mysterious enchantment. "Wait a moment." But at that instant, Duan Yun spoke to stop her. The red-dressed woman teased, "What does the young master want to wait for? Do you need me to help you? You're quite lazy." "I don't want to." "Why?" The red-dressed woman's eyes showed a hint of confusion. "You have a cold womb," Duan Yun replied. "What?" "Your tongue coating is white, with a slight green tinge around your navel and cold limbs. These are symptoms of a cold womb," Duan Yun said earnestly. The red-dressed woman frowned slightly, her gaze turning ice-cold. "I'm all dolled up like this, seeking out your company in the middle of the night to relieve the loneliness, and you tell me I have a cold womb?" As she spoke, the breath of life disappeared from her body once more, making her seem like a cold, dead corpse. "It's really a cold womb. I'm a gynecologist." "Lady, your symptoms have even worsened," Duan Yun explained. The red-dressed woman stopped talking, her face growing dark as she moved closer. Her eyes turned completely black, void of any whites, and as the dying embers of the fire reflected off her body, she cast no shadow, appearing utterly terrifying. A chill ran down Duan Yun's spine as he said, "Don't come any closer, or I'll stab you." The woman in red bore a sullen face, as pale as paper, and said coldly, "Come on then, I want you to stab me." As she sinisterly approached in a few steps, Duan Yun's heart was filled with terror. He stretched out his sword finger and thrust it forward. Ugh! A white sword chi whistled as it pierced through the woman's belly, causing her to let out a muffled groan and drift backward. Duan Yun pointed again, and her body, like smoke, drifted to the side, evading the attack. When Duan Yun readied his sword finger again, the woman had already leapt onto a tree like a ghostly figure. With her pitch-black eyes that lacked any white, she stared at Duan Yun, baring her ghastly white teeth. She coldly issued a sentence, "Gynecologist, I will remember you." Then her body merged with the red skirt, drifting with the wind into the deep darkness, vanishing from sight. Duan Yun held his sword finger, panting heavily. This woman, alternating between human and corpse-like, was eerily stranger than a ghost. Duan Yun couldn't fall back to sleep at all after that. He couldn't help but stoke the fire a bit more, hoping to drive away the sinister beings lurking in the dark. Had he not mastered swordsmanship, he might have been in real trouble tonight. Involuntarily picking up his water gourd, Duan Yun took some sips to calm his shock. But the water was only half consumed when another figure appeared. He quickly raised his finger, thinking the female ghost had returned, only to see a figure in white approaching. It was a tall young woman with a high ponytail, wearing a robe of black and white, embroidered with auspicious clouds, bearing a resemblance to the flying fish robe, exuding a heroic air, and with a very large chest. Yes, this young woman's chest was already large, and wearing the neatly tailored flying fish robe made it appear even larger. Upon seeing Duan Yun, the young woman took a soft breath and asked, "Did a woman pass by just now?" Duan Yun nodded. Yes. The woman quickly approached the fire. Standing there, she took a deep breath towards the forest below, then promptly planted 2 purple flags on the ground, saying, "There will be several people in purple robes coming soon. Please remind them for me, young brother." Having said that, the woman took another look at Duan Yun and asked, "Did that woman do anything to you?" Duan Yun replied, "She didn't succeed." The woman nodded thoughtfully, "Be careful." Then, she sped up and disappeared into the darkness, in the exact same direction the woman in red had left. Having just driven away a red-clad ghost and now having encountered a large-chested woman, both of whom had now disappeared, Duan Yun felt that tonight was quite lively in this desolate wilderness. Yet, the real commotion was still to come. In less than the time it takes an incense stick to burn, for figures in purple robes appeared. Duan Yun recognized the purple robes. They looked similar to those of a constable, although he had never seen them in purple before. After the 4 purple-robed constables saw him, Duan Yun took the initiative to say, "There was a woman just now who planted 2 small flags over there." Upon seeing the flags, the leader of the group bowed with his hands together and said, "Thank you, young brother," then quickly pursued the trail. Watching the 4 figures disappear, Duan Yun muttered to himself, "Is this a marketplace?" No one appeared in the early half of the night, yet the latter half was bustling with a female ghost, a large-chested woman, and purple-robed constables. It couldn't be livelier. After those people left, the desolate forest returned to its silence. Duan Yun sat down and thought to himself, "That should be everyone, right?" At that moment, a series of light footsteps echoed. Duan Yun looked at the large-chested woman in the flying fish robe with her high ponytail and asked in confusion, "Why did you come back?" "They went after you." Saying so, he gestured in the direction where the purple-robed constables had vanished. The large-chested woman sat down directly in front of the fire and said, "That wasn't me you saw." Duan Yun? He found his brain wasn't quite keeping up. Chapter 6. The Absurd Martial World. The woman sitting across the fire with a prominent chest looked exactly like the one who had left earlier. Not just the face, but even the hairstyle was the same. No, even the tiny mole under her eyes was identical. You're telling me that wasn't you just now? Does this woman have a split personality? Duan Yun couldn't help feeling anxious. Honestly, he had a pretty good impression of this woman and the 4 purple-clad policemen, as they seemed to be on a mission to capture a female ghost. But what was this action? At this moment, he felt there might be no normal people here tonight. Seeing Duan Yun still unconvinced, the woman crossed her arms and coolly explained, "That was my sister. We are twins. I have a mole here, she does not." Saying so, the woman slightly tugged at her neckline, revealing a small mole along her collarbone. Then, she closed her neckline again. Watching this, Duan Yun, as if deep in thought, said, "You are indeed not your sister. Your sister has a stronger fiery energy." Ha! Now it was the woman's turn to show a puzzled expression. Yes, Duan Yun realized that this woman and that person were not the same person, not because of the mole but because of the symptoms. From his perspective as a gynecologist, the fiery energy was stronger in the sister mentioned earlier. "Aren't you going to help?" Duan Yun pointed towards the 2 small flags. "No need, with 4 in purple, my sister will be fine." After saying that, the little sister lazily stretched out, making the curves under her cloak even more obvious, making it almost impossible for Duan Yun to avoid her sight. Then, the woman, looking at Duan Yun's face, asked the same question her sister had before. "Have you encountered the woman in red?" Duan Yun nodded. "She actually didn't abduct you," the woman said, a bit surprised. "Maybe it's because you all were pursuing her closely. She was afraid of delays." Duan Yun didn't know why they both cared about this. No, the fairies from Red Building have a unique movement technique. Even if she was carrying you, it wouldn't have slowed her down much. On the run, she has already seduced and abandoned 7 men. Seduced and abandoned on the run? Duan Yun was greatly shocked. They can fly and seduce simultaneously, without slowing down, the sister explained. Duan Yun was again shocked and exclaimed, "Is that female ghost so terrifying?" He shivered retrospectively, realizing if he hadn't surprised and injured her timely, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Of course, she's terrifying. Those fairies from Red Building claim they are fallen fairies from heaven, having to undergo trials before they can return to heavenly court. The trials they speak of involve continuously seducing men. Good-looking men like you, seducing and then discarding. The victims lose all their yang qi and spend the rest of their lives lying down waiting to die, the younger sister explained. Clearly, this younger sister liked to talk a lot. Noticing that Duan Yun was a newcomer, she continued, "Actually, the fairies from Red Building aren't the scariest. The most horrifying is Yellow Jade Island's Jade Guanyin." Jade Guanyin. It is said she is the most beautiful woman in the world, and also favors abducting men to seduce, leaving them as living dead only able to obey her. However, the men Jade Guanyin abducts are usually quite famous, either talented aristocrats or renowned young heavenly prides. Although you are handsome, you don't need to worry too much. Duan Yun thought to himself, "Who are you looking down upon?" In any case, when traveling in martial world, make sure not to offend the wrong women, the younger sister kindly advised. Duan Yun couldn't help but ask out of curiosity, "What about you?" The younger sister said with an easygoing expression, "I am, of course, a very rare good woman. My sister and I are goddess catchers from Qingqi Bureau. We came here because those fairies from Red Building seduced too many men, and we're here to capture them." At that moment, a string of purple smoke rose in the distance. Big Sister stood up and said, "My sister is calling me. I should go." Duan Yun also stood up and asked, "May I ask?" "You don't need to ask my name. Even if you did, I wouldn't tell you. It would only lead to your fantasy. Despite your decent appearance, you're not a match for me. My family wouldn't approve, and I wouldn't like you either. Farewell." Saying this, Big Sister scooped up 2 small flags in her hands and quickly walked away with her long legs. Watching her leave, Duan Yun couldn't help but complain, "What kind of shadow woman is this? I just wanted to ask for directions." Duan Yun's experience tonight was nothing short of bizarre and rich. It was only the first night, and meeting the Red Building Fairy, the goddess catcher from the Qingqi Bureau, and the mentioned jade guanine by the goddess catcher, all gave him a sense of the surreal and absurd. He couldn't help but conclude, the martial artists here are all freaks, either killers or perverts. Even the seemingly righteous goddess catcher from the Qingqi Bureau was a shadow woman. Duan Yun felt the absurdity and peculiarity of this world, realizing that compared to it, the troublemaking brats of Lishui City, who liked to kick and smash, seemed somewhat normal. This world must really be sick, filled with dangers. No matter, for now, he could only take things one step at a time. At a minimum, he had to perfect his swordsmanship, eliminate those brats, and then consider other things. As he sat, dawn broke. The dark and terrifying wilderness of last night, lit up by the morning light, made Duan Yun feel as if he had returned from a horror movie set back to the real world. Of course, the tombstones in the dark forest still gave him a chilling and terrifying sensation. Duan Yun didn't dare delay. He had to find the road quickly, otherwise, he might have to spend another night in this terrifying wilderness. Following the small road for about 2 miles, the outline of a small town appeared in his sight. Well, had he walked for 10 more minutes last night, he wouldn't have had to sleep outside. However, he didn't feel like last night's hardships were in vain, since those experiences had taught him a few things. Perhaps this is what martial world is all about, full of surprises and scares. This small town was naturally not the Qingsong market that Duan Yun had planned to go to, but a place called Qingcha Market. The presence of the word market usually indicated business activities, and Qingcha Market, naturally, dealt in tea. It was just after dawn. The mountains and forests were shrouded in mist, and Duan Yun could already see a large expanse of tea fields. Some diligent tea farmers were already busy in the fields. Duan Yun entered the town, and the whole town was gradually waking up. Several mules carried crates of tea, moving in and out of the larger tea shops. After a night of tossing and turning, Duan Yun was also somewhat hungry. So he went to an oil tea shop and ordered a bowl of their oil tea. This so-called oil tea was actually a pasty stir-fried flour, generally without tea leaves, but perhaps because Qingcha Town really had an abundance of tea, this oil tea actually contained some crushed tea leaves, making it surprisingly tasty. After breakfast, Duan Yun started looking for a place to stay. He no longer thought about going to Qingsong Market. Qingcha Market was quite good. Only 100 miles from Lishui City, convenient for him to return and annihilate the Xuanxiong gang whenever he wanted. Last night made Duan Yun realize the dangers of this world, and what he needed most now was to find a relatively peaceful environment to enhance his strength. He not only had to kill both the higher-ups and subordinates of the Xuanxiong gang, but the next time he encountered a creature like the Red Building Fairy, he would definitely slay it. Obstetrician, I remember you. He still remembered what the woman in red had said last night. You hold grudges, so why shouldn't I? Once his divine skill was accomplished, he would definitely slaughter the entire Red Building Fairy group to avoid walking in fear of being assaulted. Although Duan Yun was hardly even a beginner in martial world, he suddenly harbored heroic aspirations. Because he knew that he was a rare genius in sword Dao. Once he became the sword god, there would be nowhere in the world he couldn't go, and he would fear neither murder nor assault. Chapter 7: The Chest in the Water. Finding suitable accommodation within Qingcha Market was not easy. Though there were inns in the city, they were beyond Duan Yun's budget. After all, to achieve a level of destruction that could annihilate Xuanxiong gang in one go, he would need at least 2 months. For 2 months, even the cheapest rooms with earthen floors were insufficient, not to mention inns were crowded and noisy, which could interfere with his training and might even have Xuanxiong gang's members appearing. Thus, Duan Yun decided to rent a place. Renting was relatively cheaper since he still needed to cover his living and food expenses for these 2 or 3 months. In theory, Duan Yun was now a master of exceptional skills, as his jade sword finger could easily pierce holes in people and his water moon sword energy could sever someone in half with one strike. Yet he still couldn't find an easy way to monetize these skills. He surely couldn't resort to killing and robbing, could he? If he did, how would he be any different from the Xuanxiong gang or the Red Building Fairy who committed murder and adultery? Duan Yun despised them and would not become one of them. Ultimately, Duan Yun chose a bamboo hut on the outskirts of the city. The previous owner of this bamboo hut seemed to be a scholar, as there were some self-entertaining calligraphy and paintings hanging inside. It appeared that no one had lived here for a long time, accumulating a thick layer of dust, presenting a rundown appearance. Uninformed, one might think it was a haunted house. Duan Yun quickly decided to rent it, because it indeed was the lowest-priced house he could rent at the moment. He was only renting for 3 months, and few landlords were willing to rent it out, otherwise they would ask for a high price. After all, Qingcha Market had a thriving tea business, and with merchants and salesmen coming and going, good locations were never lacking tenants. Moreover, his main goal was to avoid the Xuanxiong gang and concentrate on his training. He needed quiet, as too many people and prying eyes would be detrimental. After touring around, Duan Yun found nothing else to fault besides a cemetery not far behind the house. 5 pieces of silver per month. What more could one want? Duan Yun even liked this place, especially because there was a bai lake in front of the small courtyard. Looking through a collapsed part of the courtyard wall, the view was picturesque. In his previous life, this would definitely be considered a lakeside house. At that moment, Duan Yun suddenly saw a broken stone with a human-like face carved on it among the overgrown grass in the courtyard. What is this? The landlord glanced at it and explained. This is, of course, a divine protector known as Shurgondang brought here to guard the house. I told you before that there was a cemetery at the back. My nephew cared about that, so he brought this here. The landlord had mentioned that this house was originally his nephew's before it was handed over to him. I see, Duan Yun replied. Are you going to rent it or not? Running back and forth over this little amount of silver is tiring for me. It was apparent that the landlord had little patience. To him, Duan Yun, a short-term tenant renting for only 3 months, totaling less than 2 taels of silver, was marginally better than nothing. After all, he still operated a sizable tea shop, and this was just pocket money, enough perhaps for a drink. Duan Yun didn't fret over it, signed the contract, and paid the rent. After the landlord left, Duan Yun looked around again and was still quite satisfied with this residence. Aside from being a bit old and dusty, it would certainly provide shelter from wind and rain and keep mosquitoes away. For the next 2 or 3 months, he'd have to make this place his home. The bamboo hut lacked a well, but it was not far from the lake. Duan Yun carried a large water jar, which had been left unattended for who knows how long, to the lake. It was now afternoon, and the weather was slightly overcast. The lake water was clear, with many water plants growing at the bottom, presenting a tranquil, deep green expanse. The water at this edge of the lake was clear to the bottom, while the color turned dark and depths unclear further out. Duan Yun washed the dust off the water jar, relieved that it was still usable, otherwise, he would have had to go to the market to buy a new one. Having filled the water jar, he carried it back to the house. Ever since he started practicing Jade Sword True Understanding, Duan Yun's body felt much better than before. Just last night, he walked over 100 miles in one breath, and could still continue training for most of the night, which was unimaginable before he started sword training. The benefits of sword training once again became evident. Afterward, Duan Yun cleaned the room and collected some dry grass to spread on the bed, making the bamboo house barely habitable. Unknowingly, it was almost dusk. He hurried to the market to buy enough rice, meat, and vegetables to avoid going out for several days and focus on his cultivation. This Qingcha market was busier than Lishui City, as merchants and vendors still needed to eat and live. After buying some rice, meat, vegetables, salt, and Sichuan pepper, Duan Yun headed back home. As the sky darkened, Duan Yun walked along the small path by the lake, where wild grass grew on the shores and aquatic plants spread under the water. Approaching home, Duan Yun suddenly looked in one direction. There was a chest in the lake, a very large chest, about the same as those used by guards transporting valuables in TV dramas of his previous life. Even larger, the chest was submerged near the lakeshore, half buried in the mud, half exposed, with a lock on it. Duan Yun looked around, feeling curious. Although he lived on the outskirts of the city, it was not far from Qingcha Market, and some tea farmers lived nearby. At noon, when he was looking at the house, Duan Yun had seen some tea farmers passing by. However, the chest was sunk there, not far from the road and the lakeshore. He definitely wasn't the first to see it. Didn't anyone else get curious? Didn't anyone retrieve it to have a look? Such a large chest, even carved with delicate patterns and locked, does not seem empty. It might contain treasures. Yet it lay sunk at the bottom, as if it had been there for a long time, ignored, partly entangled with aquatic plants. Honestly, this object piqued Duan Yun's curiosity. However, he resisted the urge. Yes, the chest might contain treasures, but it might also contain other things. Others avoided it, so he too would for now. Duan Yun returned home, started a fire, and cooked. This would be his first night in his new home, a new beginning. So he placed half of a smoked meat he just bought on top of the white rice. It was necessary to have a good first meal. The rice cooked with the meat absorbed the fats from the smoked meat, which, paired with the white rice, didn't feel too greasy. Afterward, Duan Yun used his sword to slice the smoked meat and began eating heartily. Compared to his previous life, these rice grains were much coarser, but nothing beats the flavor of the meat. Sitting on the steps with a bowl in hand, eating rice and looking at the ancient, overgrown courtyard, Duan Yun suddenly realized deeply that he indeed wasn't in his original timeline anymore. This world had many bizarre and terrifying people, filled with murder and deceit, but it also had moments of peace like now. He, Duan Yun, would surely lead an exciting life in this world. Yes, at least more exciting than living like a walking corpse working as a corporate slave in his former life. Even now, recalling past events from his former life, Duan Yun couldn't think of anything that made him feel proud or deeply nostalgic. This was another kind of sadness. This life must not be the same. Moonlight sprinkled across the courtyard. Duan Yun picked up his sword, practicing under the moonlight. Right here, he would become stronger. Chapter 8. The Fall of the Goddess Constable. For 10 consecutive days, Duan Yun did not leave his house, either eating and sleeping or practicing. The weeds in the yard had been cleanly swept away by the water-moon sword energy, and Shi Gandang saw Duan Yun's performance every day. The wall of the courtyard had already collapsed partially before, and now it was even more riddled with holes. The wall was one of the minor reasons Duan Yun chose this place. It was suitable for practicing Jade Sword Finger. At least he wouldn't have to compensate the landlord when moving out. However, he still underestimated his own power. This section of the broken wall had already been shot to look like a pockmarked face and would likely be completely destroyed within a few days. Duan Yun's plan for increasing his true chi followed as expected, having grown almost twofold in just 10 days. At the same time, every morning when Duan Yun woke up, his blanket would always be pitching a tent. Duan Yun had long realized that whenever he practiced sword the previous night, he would indeed be full of vigor the next day, hard to suppress. This wasn't normal given its persistently long duration. He often had to take a cold shower to calm down. Duan Yun couldn't help speculating. It must be due to practicing posture and swallowing and spitting moonlight. The moonlight, in his perception, is moistening, certainly having the effect of nourishing yin and strengthening yang. If this speculation was true, he could try being a urologist in the future, perhaps teaching the jade sword stance and the breathing techniques to those with kidney deficiencies to help them regain their vigor. Indeed, there's more demand for treating kidney deficiencies than merely providing gynecological care. However, he wasn't in a rush to be a doctor now or to say, for quite some time in the future, doctor might just remain a side job. After all, in this world of killing and lechery, enhancing one's strength is what's most important. At the same time, the weather was getting hotter, and Duan Yun often practiced sword in nothing but his underwear, sweating profusely. During good weather, he could even see the dim blue ghostly flames drifting from the graveyard behind his house, which were quite beautiful. But today seemed like a day to go out. The previously bought rice and meat and vegetables, while there were still some rice and smoked meat left, the fresh meat and vegetables were long consumed. Without timely consumption, it was the peak of summer after all, food could easily spoil. Afterward, Duan Yun went to the market again, purchasing some rice, meat and vegetables. Every meal now had rice and meat. This was all thanks to the silver dropped by Wang Li. Otherwise he couldn't afford swords, and such a life would not be possible. Of course, this was only enough for him to live lavishly for a month or two. But Duan Yun was not worried. With his capabilities, he wouldn't starve no matter what he did. On the way back, Duan Yun passed by a bookstore and found a book called The Fall of the Goddess Constable. Seeing the title, Duan Yun couldn't help but recall the two sisters from the divine catcher he met the other days, wondering if they caught that red-dressed female ghost. With the motive of broadening his understanding of the world, Duan Yun decided to buy the book to increase his knowledge. The bookstore owner chuckled, "Young man, good taste. This book would have been banned over a decade ago." Duan Yun exclaimed, "Why isn't it banned now?" The owner scratched his head, explaining, "The world's so chaotic, government officials can get replaced unknowingly, and the Qingqi Bureau and the court offices have no time to care about this." Finally, Duan Yun bought the Fall of the Goddess Constable for 1 silver. Honestly, he felt it was expensive, as his Jade Sword True Understanding cost only 1 silver. But the owner said this kind of book contained illustrations, hence the higher price. Duan Yun didn't want to fuss too much over it. With his rare swordsmanship talent, squabbling over a tiny amount of silver didn't seem proper. Holding the book beneficial for expanding martial world knowledge close to his chest, Duan Yun walked back home. On the way back, he saw again that chest sunk in the water. Duan Yun thought for a moment, then continued walking. In fact, every time he previously went out to fetch water, he would notice this large chest. This made him a bit uncomfortable. Could it be that he was the only one curious about it? However, thankfully, he was now more interested in the Fall of the Goddess Constable. After returning home, Duan Yun took out this forbidden book to supplement his knowledge of the martial world. The story inside really told the tale of Shin Yuer, a divine catcher from the Qingqi Bureau. Shin Yuer was the youngest and most beautiful divine catcher in Lai Zhou's Qingqi Bureau, only 23 years old, exceptionally talented, highly skilled, and having cracked several major cases at a young age. She was a goddess not to be trifled with in many men's hearts. Yet, this untouchable goddess had particularly caught someone's attention. One day, while investigating a case, divine catcher Shin Yuer exchanged a few words with a well-known demon, and then, she was captured. The book recounted how Shin Yuer was captured by the demon with the surname Hua, initially imprisoned in a dark cellar, and later under house arrest in an attic, among many indescribable acts, embellished with somewhat crude but vivid illustrations, which Duan Yun found quite enjoyable. Later, the divine catcher was forced to give birth to 3 children with the demon, becoming mentally disoriented and washing her face with tears daily. The story ended when the demon was surrounded and attacked. Divine catcher Shin Yuer tragically sacrificed herself to block a sword for the demon, dying with tears. Afterward, the demon, enraged, went on a killing spree, finally saying, "Yuer, in the next life you are still mine," then jumped into the abyss holding the body of the divine catcher, concluding a tragic tale of malice. Duan Yun closed the book, veins throbbing on his forehead, unable to help but curse. What kind of T plot is this? So it was true love between the divine catcher and the demon? Was the world wrong? He had the urge to rush back and smash the book into the bookstore owner's face. Besides the part about the divine catcher being conditioned by the demon, the logic of the book was extremely frustrating, leading Duan Yun to seriously doubt the first half was written by an experienced hand, while the latter part about love and tragic fate was continued by a fairy dead set on romance, creating a severe disconnect. Could it be that the experienced writer was killed by this fairy, who then continued to express herself? Having encountered fairies of this world, Duan Yun felt this speculation wasn't far-fetched. Duan Yun glanced at the pen name Fairy Ziyu, holding a grudge in his heart. If he ever met her, don't blame him for being irritable and personally feeding her pastries. Duan Yun resolutely tore the latter half of the book, using it as toilet paper in the latrine, keeping only the first half for study. Although the plot was crappy, it still augmented Duan Yun's knowledge of the martial world, albeit uncertain of its authenticity. That is, when the story unfolded, there were many demons and martial madmen in this world, with the Qingqi Bureau backed by the court no longer being dominant. hence the plot where the divine catcher was captured for decades and her childhood sweetheart from Qingqi Bureau was unable to rescue her. What was the current level of the Qingqi Bureau? From that night's performance, at least those sister divine catchers seemed relatively imposing. Unknowingly, night had fallen, and moonlight showered the land. Duan Yun cleared his mood, beginning to practice under the moonlight. He assumed the jade sword stance, contemplating the issues encountered in Embrace Sparrow Tail, while some plots of the divine catcher still stimulated his nerves. Duan Yun recalled the uniform of the sister divine catchers he saw that night, truly heroic and impressive, especially the tight leather pants that accentuated their long legs. Wait, uniform? At that moment, the brilliant mind of the Sword Dao genius flickered again. Chapter 9 Embrace Sparrow Tail. Success. Embrace Sparrow Tail. Duan Yun's mind concentrated intensely as the moonlight-like jade sword True Qi burst forth from his body, forming the Dharma image of the jade sword immortal. But this time, the Dharma image was more concrete than ever before. The jade sword immortal Dharma appeared clad in snow-white clothes, with light azure floating around the shoulders, exuding an aura of immortality, while the white silk stockings distinctly marked the outline of her shapely thighs. The jade sword immortal which Duan Yun envisioned inside his sea of consciousness was perfectly presented here. Indeed, he even added the detailed patterns of white silk. Duan Yun formed the jade sword finger gesture, and almost simultaneously the Dharma image did the same. In just an instant, tens of delicate jade hands appeared behind the Dharma image, like a blooming lotus flower and resembling the fan tail feathers of a peacock. Kill! Duan Yun unleashed a jade sword finger, and the tens of jade hands of the jade sword immortal Dharma executed the move at the same time. A sound resembling a sudden downpour arose, as half of the wall crumbled into pieces, and the jade sword immortal Dharma dissipated. He had mastered it. This is the final technique of jade sword true understanding called Embrace Sparrow Tail, capable of summoning the jade sword immortal Dharma and launching simultaneous attacks with numerous jade hands. If the third technique, jade sword finger, resembles firing a handgun, then Embrace Sparrow Tail is akin to upgrading the handgun to a Gatling gun. Of course, the consumption of jade sword true Qi is also immense. Duan Yun concluded that he had never mastered this technique before because he was too rigid, merely visualizing the Dharma image depicted in the secret book. The Dharma image in the secret book was overly simplified and not specific enough to be considered vividly lifelike. He had been thinking about the uniform of goddess catcher, and thus a stroke of inspiration stuck, integrating the concept of uniform and skin into the Dharma image. Would the Dharma image become more spirited and vivid with new, detailed skin, and further evolve? Just like many video games, where premium skins often feel better than the original ones. The answer is affirmative. Who else? Duan Yun felt his swordsmanship talent and wisdom were astonishing, as there were no sword Dao problems he could not solve. After resting for a while, Duan Yun gritted his teeth and once again performed Embrace Sparrow Tail. This time, the jade sword immortal Dharma manifested a new variation. Previously, the jade sword immortal wore a floating snow-white dress with white silk surpassing snow, but now she appeared in a black dress with black silk stockings like smoke, emanating a mysterious aura. Kill! Duan Yun once again performed the jade sword finger, and the black silk jade sword immortal Dharma's jade hands extended, emitting sword chi. If the previous white silk jade sword immortal Dharma's jade sword finger was upright and forthright, exuding a dominating force that pierced through everything, then the current black silk jade sword immortal Dharma's jade sword finger sword chi moved in elusive arcs, giving off a feeling of unpredictability. This is the power of skins. The black silk jade sword immortal Dharma dissipated, leaving Duan Yun extremely excited. Too powerful. If on that night 10 days ago, he could only unexpectedly wound the red building fairy, allowing her to escape successfully. He could even feel that had Goddess Catcher not pursued her and continuous combat ensued, he definitely would have been at a disadvantage. But now, let her try again? He assured that he would leave her fully satisfied. However, at this moment, Duan Yun also felt deeply exhausted. Embrace Sparrowtail is the ultimate technique of Jade Sword True Understanding and holds the greatest power, but likewise, its consumption is enormous. Having executed it twice, he had nearly exhausted all his true chi, and Duan Yun felt an overwhelming fatigue as if overexerting. Especially the second time it was used, Black Silk Jade Sword Immortal's Dharma image could only release half of its sword chi from the jade hand, indicating that he had reached his limit. One can only say that although this move is strong, it definitely should not be overused and should be kept as a trump card. Of course, if his true chi continues to increase and his body gets accustomed to this intense intensity, there would be no problem at all in releasing sword chi wildly. Having mastered Embrace Sparrowtail as his trump card, Duan Yun undoubtedly felt more confident. Now that he had learned all 4 moves of Jade Sword True Understanding, what he needed to focus on was solely enhancing the capacity of his true chi. Duan Yun was not clear about his current level, whether it was third-rate or second-rate master. He could only use the entire Xuanxiong gang as a benchmark. In any case, it was still not enough to eliminate the entire Xuanxiong gang. He needed to continue working hard according to his plan. 2 months passed in a flash. Duan Yun felt an unprecedented peace in this small bamboo hut. When practicing Jade Sword stance daily, apart from occasionally experiencing hallucinations of many faces, he was only slightly bothered by the need to take cold showers every morning to cool down. The effects of nourishing yin and strengthening yang were too good. Now, his true chi capacity had also approached the preset target. When he left Lishui City, he could consecutively release about 10 water moon sword energy or perform Jade Sword Finger 20 times. His plan was to increase this true chi capacity tenfold within 100 days, meaning he could release 100 strands of water moon sword energy or perform Jade Sword Finger 200 times. Now, after about 70 days, he had achieved this goal ahead of time. However, Duan Yun also encountered a bottleneck. That is, the speed to further increase the capacity of true chi had more than halved. The chi sea in the Dantian, after all, was not a boundless sea. He had thought his prodigious talent in sword Dao meant he had no bottlenecks. But regretfully, being human, there were still limits. Since the goal had been achieved, it was time to return to Lishui City and eliminate the Xuanxiong gang. Duan Yun was not vengeful, but he disliked having lingering worries that affected his sleep. Speaking of worries, Duan Yun thought again of that chest submerged in the water. After so many days, it seemed like he was still the only one curious about its contents. Since he was leaving, he decided to pull the large chest out of the water to see what exactly was inside. It was nearing dusk, the remaining sun blood-red. The lake's surface shimmered, but underneath was a shadowy abyss, seemingly another world. That chest submerged in the water, showing half of its body painted red, was supposed to appear festive, but in such an environment, it seemed somewhat eerie. Duan Yun took a deep breath and dived into the water. Since practicing Jade Sword True Understanding, Duan Yun's physique had also risen dramatically. After entering the water, there was no feeling of suffocation. Relying on the breathing technique from Jade Sword True Understanding, he could breathe freely underwater. At this moment, he had reached the vicinity of this red chest. Duan Yun swung his sword, cutting the seaweeds covering it. Then he gripped the chest's latch and pulled upward. The moment he touched it, Duan Yun could feel that the chest was not empty. It was heavy. The strength he had gained from his recent practice was many times greater than before, but pulling it up in the water was still somewhat strenuous. True chi flowed within Duan Yun's body, and he yanked. The chest immediately broke free from the lakebed's muck, and he dragged it towards the shore. After the time it takes 2 incense sticks to burn, this red-painted large chest had been moved by Duan Yun into the courtyard. Duan Yun couldn't help but exhale deeply, changed into clean clothes in the house, and then approached the chest. What was inside this chest? The answer would soon be revealed. Chapter 10: The Evil Never Ends. By now, the sun was about to set, leaving only a golden fringe on the horizon. At this moment, Duan Yun couldn't help but scrutinize the chest more meticulously. It was an exquisite camphorwood chest inlaid with brass. Even the lock was made of brass. Just the chest itself must be worth some money. He knocked on it with his sword and found both the chest and the lock to be very sturdy. Such a fine chest would likely be well suited for storing jewels and gold. Duan Yun had been fixated on this chest, driven by his intense curiosity and also because he was running out of money. Day after day of training and consuming meat at every meal, his savings were nearly depleted. What if the chest actually contained gold, silver, or something valuable? Wouldn't that be like a pie falling from the sky, solving his pressing needs? After all, the chest was indeed very heavy. Duan Yun excitedly rubbed his hands together, picked up his long sword, and prepared to open the chest. To be honest, it felt quite thrilling, like unwrapping a mystery box. But at the same time, this large chest, soaked in water for so long and unclaimed, also emitted a sense of eeriness. What if it contained a corpse? With a clang, Duan Yun pried the lock with his long sword, and the lid sprang open upon contact. However, Duan Yun didn't approach it immediately. The chest was deep, and from his position, he couldn't clearly see what was inside, only a vague black silhouette. After confirming there were no poisonous gases or the like, Duan Yun, sword in hand, moved closer. Right as he reached the edge of the chest and peered inside, a pair of jaundiced eyes stared back at him. Almost simultaneously, a pitch-black paw shadow struck, and Duan Yun, reacting swiftly, raised his sword to block. The clang of metal resonated, and the sword body trembled. Duan Yun couldn't help but take 3 steps back. What unexpectedly swept out was a set of ferocious bear claws. With a loud bang, a humanoid bear toppled the chest and lunged out, its presence terrifying. Duan Yun was startled and lifted his long sword to unleash a water moon sword energy. His recent training had integrated water moon slash and jade sword finger into his instincts. The silvery white sword chi hissed as it tore through the bear's hide, drawing a stream of foul-smelling blood. No sooner had the bear emerged from the chest, Duan Yun struck with a jade sword finger. With a snap, a bloodied hole exploded under the bear's jaw. Just then, Duan Yun swiftly dodged to the side as the bear sent the chest hurtling towards him with an imposing sweep. Yet, in that brief interval, Duan Yun, still wielding his long sword, released another crescent-shaped sword chi. With a hiss, the sword chi sliced deeply into the bear's side, causing blood to gush out. The next moment, instead of continuing its assault, the bear turned and made a dash to the side. With a loud crash, it collapsed a lean-to, broke through the wall, and escaped. Along the way, it kicked several flying bricks at Duan Yun. Strange. Very odd indeed for a humanoid bear to emerge from a sunken chest. The behavior of this bear was also puzzling. Duan Yun gazed at the collapsed lean-to and wall, thinking about the silver deposit he left with the landlord, and suddenly erupted into rage, chasing after it like the wind. To think you can break my house and run away. Even if it hadn't broken the house, Duan Yun would not let the bear go. My treasure chest turned into a murderous bear. If you don't die, who will? Duan Yun, brandishing his sword, sprinted forward. He had never learned light body movement techniques, but his physical fitness, enhanced by Jade Sword True Understanding, was extraordinary, and he ran at lightning speed. The bear, seemingly intelligent, thought its sprint would surely shake off the troublesome pursuer. Yet at the next glance, it looked back, and shock filled its bare eyes. It saw the man with a sword behind it, his legs a blur of afterimages, quickly closing in. With 2 swishes, Duan Yun, while running, launched 2 more jade sword fingers. The sharp finger sword energy penetrated the bear's right hind leg, causing it to lose its balance. But this bear was tenacious. Even so, it kept hobbling and fleeing at an undiminished pace. Duan Yun's expression grew solemn. For the bear was heading towards Qingcha Market. Was it seeking to cause chaos in the market square to escape? Such a bear loose in the market, who knew what disasters would unfold? Duan Yun could not delay. His true chi circulated, and his legs became a whirlwind. Along the way, wild grasses were flattened, kicking up a haze of dust. No matter how desperately it ran, the bear was caught up with. Afterward, Fierce sword chi bombarded the bear's hefty body like ceaseless rain. In barely a dozen breaths, the bear's body was marred by 7 or 8 deep sword cuts, over a dozen bloody holes, with many in the head, making it look like it was blooming. Roar! The humanoid bear let out a reluctant roar of fury, then lost its strength and tumbled down a mud slope, unable to get back up. Duan Yun landed 2 more jade swordfinger strikes on its head, and with that the humanoid bear stopped moving for good. Even though it was already dead, the body of the humanoid bear lying there still gave off an immense sense of oppression. It didn't take long for the humanoid bear's flesh to become rigid, appearing not as if it had just died, but as if it had been dead for a while. Duan Yun looked at the corpse of the humanoid bear, still feeling a strange sensation in his heart. Although humanoid is part of its name, due to its human-like eating habits and certain behaviors, it isn't a real human. Yet this bear's actions were eerily human-like, especially when it threw the chest and kicked the bricks. Duan Yun even thought it behaved like a martial artist. Does that mean the bear was trained by someone, or that the bear itself had martial training? At this moment, Duan Yun's eyes narrowed slightly. He spotted a scar on the bear's head. This scar was certainly not his doing, as it still had stitches on it. Duan Yun couldn't help but cut along the scar with his sword. When he sliced open the skin on the head, he found the brain of the bear inside. An even stronger stench of blood hit him, causing Duan Yun to frown with a look of surprise on his face. This level of astonishment was even greater than when the bear had emerged from the chest. Because in the bear's brain there were 2 brains. One was small and the other was large, connected in the middle by what looked like fine branches. These branches, while appearing like fine twigs with forks, conveyed a sense of flesh and blood, as if flesh had grown within the branches. Upon seeing this, the first impression in Duan Yun's mind was grafting. Indeed, it was very much like the fruit tree grafting he had seen in his previous life. But who had grafted another brain into this bear? A weird and terrifying feeling spread throughout Duan Yun's body. The larger brain must have been a human's. A human brain sewn into a bear's brain. This could explain why the bear's behavior and thoughts were so human-like. But, can you really sew it like that? Are you aiming for a Nobel Prize? For a moment, Duan Yun looked up at the ancient contours of the Qingcha market buildings, revealing an expression of confusion. He then glanced at the human brain inside the bear's head, an involuntary chill running through him. Who the hell did this? What kind of monster would sew a human brain into a bear, trap it inside a box, sink it in the lake, and wait for the curious to fish it out? If he hadn't mastered the jade sword true understanding, perhaps he would have died the instant he opened the chest, killed and eaten by this bear. This chest was heavy. If it weren't for him, it would have taken several people to move it, and perhaps everyone present at the opening would have died. Duan Yun sensed a profound malice. In his feeling, it was as if a very twisted and sadistic person had intentionally concocted this scene as a fishing game. Fishing for the fools driven by curiosity. Maybe knowing who got scared, killed, or eaten by the bear that sprang from the chest was a kind of fun for that person. Duan Yun had become one of those curious fools, thankfully a highly skilled martial artist. Even though thoroughly dead, this humanoid bear with a human brain stitched into it still emitted a nauseating and ominous presence. That bear's roar had actually alarmed quite a few people. Only now did some dare to come and look. When the residents of Qingcha Market witnessed this scene, they were terrified. A bear. A humanoid bear. How could there be a humanoid bear here? And that person, did he kill the bear? By himself? What a master. Do you know him? Don't know him. Doesn't look like one of the Tea King's men. Wait a minute. Oldley, isn't that your tenant? Landlord Oldley, trembling with fear, said, Looks like it. And you dare to collect rent from him? Ha! With that skill, he's either a murderer or a pervert, you. At this moment, the crowd began to retreat as Duan Yun approached. Folks, does anyone have a fire stick? May I borrow one? Run! A shout from someone sent the crowd scattering in an instant, leaving Duan Yun standing there, dumbfounded. I'm handsome and not a ghost, why run? I just wanted to borrow a fire to burn the bear. Wusong became a hero for beating a tiger, yet I kill a strange bear and this is the treatment I get. Chapter 11 Invisible. Duan-yun couldn't borrow any fire, so he had to go to the market himself and bought a few fire sticks, before returning and burning the bear man. A bear with a human brain, he couldn't rest easy without burning it. The blazing flames enveloped the bear, and the air was instantly filled with the fragrance and charred smell of burning fat. Had he not seen that human brain, he wouldn't have tried the bear meat, because it was too weird. The fire grew bigger and bigger until the whole bear was thoroughly roasted into charcoal. Duan-yun then delivered a water moon slash, chopping it into pieces. Only then did he feel relieved to leave. After this incident, Duan-yun had learned his lesson. In his previous life, he would only encounter such malicious treasure box monsters when playing soul-type games. But in this absurd and terrifying world, such things could actually happen. All one can say is that opening boxes comes with risks and one must be cautious. The box was always there. If one day someone else opened it, and they were not as skilled in martial arts as he was, it would likely end in tragedy. He also counted it as indirectly eliminating a menace. As for why a bear could live so long inside a water box, why it didn't move before, and only after the box was opened, Duan-yun didn't want to try and understand anymore. Its head was transplanted with a human head. What more could science explain? Over these past 2 months of cultivation, Duan-yun lived a dull life, almost accustomed to this stability and peace. Yet this box reminded him that this was still the perilous and absurd martial world. Upon returning to his bamboo hut, Duan-yun began to pack his luggage. The side room and courtyard wall had collapsed on one side, which was difficult to fix in a short time since it required wall mending and plastering, and he had no experience in construction. The deposit was temporarily a lost cause. He could only wait until he had killed everyone from the Xuanxiong gang and come back. There was no need to explain to the landlord first, since going back and forth and killing the Xuanxiong gang would not take many days. Still some time before dawn, Duan-yun was already on his way. He was going to send the Xuanxiong gang off, at least he needed to get there by lunch. He would need a full meal to have the energy to kill. In the thick night, the world was as dim as when he had previously slept in the wilderness. However, Duan-yun's mood was completely different from before. More than 2 months ago, he was fleeing from disaster, escaping, but now he was going to settle this trouble. He wasn't holding grudges, but only by eliminating the Xuanxiong gang could he resolve the difficulties of hiding, living in fear, and being unable to return home. At this time, the end of summer was just approaching, earlier than he had expected it to cool down. Following the old route back had a bit of a sense of revisiting the old place. In the faint moonlight, Duan-yun walked through the wasteland again, seeing the graves and the tree trunk pierced by his jade sword finger. It had only been a little over 2 months, yet it felt like a lifetime had passed. Now he was much stronger than before. Duan-yun walked briskly on the deserted road, his steps fast, not feeling tired. Now he could travel 200 miles a day without breaking a sweat. This was the benefit of cultivation. Traveling continuously from dark to dawn, from dawn to noon, from solitary on the road to the fields where he could see farming villagers, Duan-yun finally arrived at Lishui City. In over 2 months, Lishui City hadn't changed much. If anything had changed, it was that there were a few more graves in the suburbs. Dying from illness or being beaten or killed was always quite easy in this territory. Nevertheless, Duan-yun still made it to lunch. He ate stewed noodles in the city, a large bowl with a stewed chicken leg added. If one must say what Duan-yun still missed about this place, then the old brand stewed noodles and the rent-free old house would be the 2 things. He had just eaten halfway when 3 members of the Xuanxiong gang sat down. Duan-yun continued to eat, his left hand already forming a sword finger under the table. One of the Xuanxiong gang disciples suddenly looked at him and said, "What are you looking at?" Duan-yun did not respond. Just as the Xuanxiong gang disciple was about to continue his rant, their noodles arrived, and with his companions calling, he stopped paying attention to Duan-yun and continued eating. Duan-yun was very disappointed in him, only concerned with eating. Judging by the thickness of the palm of Xuanxiong gang disciple, it was not as formidable as Wang Li, who initially wanted to kill him. In his perception, it seemed that the thicker the palm was practiced, the more extreme the person became, and more prone to tantrum like a bare child. After finishing the noodles, Duan Yun went straight home, a sense of confusion arising in his mind. Could it be that I'm not wanted? Those 3 Xuanxiong gang disciples clearly saw his handsome face but showed little reaction. When he got near his home, Duan Yun climbed over the wall like a thief. Then a bad premonition arose. Inside the house, except for a layer of thick dust and 3 feet of wild grass growing on the soil where Wang Li was buried, everything was as before. Even the strand of hair he had tied to the door lock was still there. Of course, there was a new notice on the door for unpaid protection fees. This indicated that for the past 2 months, besides those who came to collect protection fees, no one else had visited. As Duan Yun washed the dust off in the house, he lamented, "No one came? No one discovered the murder and burial. So it turns out you're just a nobody after all?" Duan Yun stood under the crooked tree, unable to help but sigh. Xuanxiong gang seemed to have forgotten they had an elite member like Wang Li. Indeed, had that guy not been dressed in Xuanxiong gang's clothing and used his habitual bare paw right hand, Duan Yun would have doubted he was from Xuanxiong gang. In the afternoon, Duan Yun went to the bustling area again, even inquiring directly at Xuanxiong gang's hall, yet no one mentioned Wang Li. Wang Li is a nobody, so the one who killed Wang Li is also a nobody. Does this count as escaping for nothing? Was the rent paid in vain? For a moment, Duan Yun felt somewhat disappointed. He had imagined that Xuanxiong gang would notice his movements, definitely seeking revenge for their brother Wang Li, and then he would unleash a massacre, slaughtering through Xuanxiong gang. Only then could he avenge the grievances of renting in exile. That would be truly satisfying. But now you're telling me he didn't need to run at all, because no one cared about Wang Li, nor the one who killed him. The two seemed to have a personal grudge, which with his counterattack had already ended everything. So, should he exterminate the entire Xuanxiong gang or not? As Duan Yun walked home, he suddenly heard loud slapping sounds and a girl's crying. He couldn't help but, like others, stretch his neck to see what was happening. He saw a man selling chestnuts and sweet potatoes being slapped by a member of Xuanxiong gang. "Can you pay the protection fee?" the Xuanxiong gang member asked while slapping. The man's face was half swollen, and his nose bled. He pleaded, "Sir, someone at home fell this time. Business isn't good, and you've raised it by 30%. I really only have this much." "Are you blaming us then?" the Xuanxiong gang member said, delivering another slap that sent the man sprawling on the ground, vomiting blood. Beside him, a little girl around 5 or 6 years old, holding the man's arm, cried out loudly, "Daddy, woo-woo, Daddy." Looking at the man on the ground, Duan Yun seemed to see himself being kicked around like a ball back then. No, it was even worse than his own experience. If he had a daughter in the future, being beaten like this in front of his daughter, whether it be for himself or his daughter, it would be unbearable. Even though the man's face was swollen like a bun and his blood had stained his clothes, he still comforted the little girl. "It's okay. Ting, Daddy's fine. Don't cry. It's fine, right? Don't cry, right?" With a thud, an underling kicked the man on the face, his teeth flying out. At that moment, the man who had been suppressing his pain finally couldn't bear it and let out a painful cry. The 3 men from Xuanxiong gang then broke into jubilant smiles. Seeing this scene, any doubt in Duan Yun's mind completely vanished. Some carbon-based life forms are simply an insult to the air while living. Was he just too kind-hearted just now? That was incredibly naive indeed. Chapter 12: The first murder brings inevitable tension. Whoever thinks the protection fee is too expensive can learn from him. Do you know how much we, the Xuanxiong gang, have sacrificed to protect your safety? Is this protection fee really too expensive? After making an example out of one as a warning to others, the members of the Xuanxiong gang continued collecting protection fees along the street. Duan Yun had previously paid the protection fee. Half of his hard-earned consulting and medicinal fees each month went to these people protecting him. This was an extremely unreasonable charge. Mainly because they charged too much, and instead of protecting, they might even turn around and beat you, treating you like a ball being kicked around. Duan Yun thought, even if he killed these 3 men now, it probably wouldn't stop such incidents from continuing. After all, without these 3, there were still other gang members of Xuanxiong gang who would come to collect, and they would beat people up if collections fell short. These gang members also had their reasons. After all, they were just working, and the protection fee was demanded by their superiors layer by layer. Therefore, Duan Yun came to a conclusion. The only way to stop these unreasonable protection fees was to kill all the members of the Xuanxiong gang, wipe out their kind, and then naturally no one would collect these unreasonable fees. Yes, that's it. In front of the stall, only a little girl remained, clutching her father's arm, crying inconsolably. The man's face was painfully distorted, tears streaming, eyes extremely bleak. No one reached out to help because this was one of the people beaten by the Xuanxiong gang. Many people watched, pointing and gossiping with a mixture of sympathy and excitement. Duan Yun walked over, grabbed the man's jaw, and pushed. With a crack, the dislocated jaw was set back in place. Duan Yun handed over a piece of silver to the man, saying, "Go see a doctor. Thank. The man's words of thanks were not yet finished when Duan Yun walked ahead, disappearing into the crowd. With his eyes swollen to slits, the man didn't even see the face of his benefactor. Holding the silver, a flicker of warmth and hope ignited in his heart, which was previously ashen. He couldn't die yet. He had a family, and he had to live on with them. Today, collecting the protection fees went smoothly, making Chun Lauer of the Xuanxiong gang somewhat moody. Since everyone obediently paid the protection fees, it shouldn't be permissible to beat people randomly. Thus, the irritation and itch in his hands could hardly be vented. Ever since he mastered the Xuanxiong palm to a certain extent, this itchiness in his hands was somewhat uncontrollable, longing for release. He regretted not hitting the sweet potato seller more vigorously. If he weren't kind-hearted and noticed the man had a daughter, would he have stopped so easily? Chun Lauer, too, had a daughter, and once humbly ran a roadside stall waiting for others to come collect protection fees. Luckily, later he seized an exceptional opportunity to join the Xuanxiong gang, mastered the Xuanxiong palm, transformed, and became the one collecting protection fees. Afterward, his family also had better days. He was deeply grateful for everything the gang had given him. Thus, he took collecting protection fees very seriously. He understood well that the protection fees were crucial for the gang's development. He couldn't allow the gang and the gang leader to suffer the slightest loss or grievance. Thinking about how Xuanxiong gang had fiercely fought for so long in Lishui City, defeated many formidable foes, and achieved a dominant position in the city, Chun Lauer couldn't help but puff out his proud chest. Just then, he suddenly heard a hissing sound, like a wine sack being punctured and leaking. Moments later, an intense pain transmitted to his brain. Chun Lauer's proud chest involuntarily bent forward. He was horrified to find a bloody hole in his abdomen, blood bubbling from within. Clueless about what happened, engulfed by immense fear, he could not help but let out a bizarre scream. Immediately following that, there was a hissing sound as another white flash pierced through his belly, leaving a second bloody hole. This time, Chun Lauer felt as if his intestines were severed. Instinctively wanting to look back, his body trembled in a blink, and 2 more bloody holes appeared. Covered in a fog of blood that danced around him, massive pain and fear overwhelmed him. With a thud, Chun Lauer's body hit the ground, twitching. Only then did his 2 minions react from their dazed state, screaming, "Ghost!" as they tried to flee, but 2 streaks of white light pierced through their hearts, killing them on the spot. 3 men who once boasted pompously all fell in an instant. Their bodies twitched and struggled, and they soon died. Their eyes remained open in death. "There's a ghost!" The nearby civilians realized what happened and scattered in panic. Duan Yun ran along with the civilians. He had no choice but to make a move, because if he delayed any longer, the protection money would be demanded from his own home. He had just given most of the silver to the sweet potato vendor, and with the previously owed protection money, it simply wasn't enough. So he had to kill them ahead of time. Such an action somewhat disrupted Duan Yun's rhythm. After all, with people being killed here, the Xuanxiong gang would certainly be on alert once they got the message. Thus, he returned home, disguised himself casually, and then headed to the Xuanxiong gang's headquarters. He hoped to kill the members of the Xuanxiong gang before the news spread widely enough to shock and then kill them all. Especially the gang leader and the elite members were primary targets since they were the most powerful and the most Xuanxiong. Yes, start with killing the gang leader. By now, it had grown dark, and Duan Yun walked the streets, slightly tense. After all, this was his first time attempting a mass assassination. The likes of Wang Li and the 3 men he had just killed were merely nobodies within the Xuanxiong gang. But the gang leader and the other elites of the Xuanxiong gang could be formidable experts. This could be his first confrontation with the masters of the Xuanxiong gang, so it was natural to feel nervous. The entrance to the headquarters of the Xuanxiong gang was grand and imposing, but there was only one young gang member dozing and guarding it. Duan Yun directly woke him up. The gatekeeper looked confused and asked, "What do you want?" "The gang leader requested me to come and treat him," Duan Yun said earnestly. The demeanor of the gatekeeper instantly turned serious, reminiscent of a concierge in a high-end community seeing the property owner, and respectfully said, "The gang leader is inside drinking, I'll take you to him." Thus, Duan Yun was led into the Xuanxiong gang's headquarters. Along the way, he observed that the headquarters consisted of 4 courtyards, quite extensive, including pavilions, clear pools, and bamboo. The largest courtyard even had a tall Xuanxiong mud sculpture, truly a luxury in Lishui City. Such extravagance came from extorting the hard-working commoners. However, the entire gang's headquarters appeared more makeshift than Duan Yun had imagined, with merely dozens of people scattered around, and fewer than 10 actually on guard. At that moment, the guide couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Doctor, the gang leader isn't seriously ill, is he?" "I really couldn't tell he was sick." Duan Yun pointed to his groin and said, "No serious illness, just a minor infection here causing some itching." The guide immediately showed a knowing expression. The gang leader did like to fool around. This courtyard was relatively secluded, with even fewer people around. At that moment, Duan Yun could already hear the clinking of glasses and voices discussing inside. The gang leader and the elite of the Xuanxiong gang were right inside. Chapter 13. Dying with Eyes Open. Inside a spacious hall, a man in red sat at the forefront. He appeared clean and refined, not at all like the gang leader of a local faction, but rather a graceful gentleman. However, his right hand was large and thick, with its back covered in black hair stiff as steel needles, giving off a strong, oppressive vibe. Below him, several of the gang's elite members were accompanying him with drinks. Apart from one old scholar holding a pen, the rest also had exceptionally thick right hands, resembling bear paws. "The gang leader is over there," a guiding gang member said to Duan Yun. "Thank you." As Duan Yun spoke, he covered his face with a mask. Seeing this, the guiding gang member was surprised and thought to himself, "Has the gang leader's illness become so severe? Even the doctor has to wear a mask. Could it be contagious?" With that thought, he quickly slipped away. In reality, Duan Yun had already disguised himself before coming here. Now with the mask on and the sky darkening, it was even harder to trace his identity. Yu Lang, the gang leader of the Xuanxiong gang, was drinking and discussing gang affairs with a few high-ranking members. Yu Lang had reached his position today not only because his Xuanxiong palm had achieved the transformation realm, but also because he was reflective. He reflected whether his members worked hard enough, whether they collected enough protection fees, and if not, how to make up for it. At that moment, a young man walked in, his face covered with a gray cloth mask painted with a crescent moon, giving off a sinister smile. "Are you the Xuanxiong gang leader?" the newcomer asked. Yu Lang was stunned and asked, "Who are you?" Without another word, Duan Yun raised his hand and pointed. A jab! A silvery white sword chi shot out from his fingertip, piercing through the abdomen of Yu Lang, who was 4 meters away. Yu Lang Lang looked down at the bloody hole in his abdomen. The wine glass fell to the ground, and only then did he let out a wail of agony. He had been wary at first but hadn't expected his assailant to penetrate him from such a distance. As the gang leader of the Xuanxiong gang, having roamed Lishui town for many years, Yu Lang Lang had survived several assassination attempts and even mastered catching hidden weapons barehanded. But this he couldn't catch. It was too fast, and it wasn't even considered a hidden weapon. Who could kill with a beam of light shot from their fingers? Several gang members, initially drunk, were jolted awake by their leader's agonizing scream. Struggling while clutching his wound, Yu Lang Lang asked in panic, "I have never crossed paths with you, sir. Why do you want to kill me? Your protection fees are unreasonable." What? Yu Lang Lang even doubted if there was something wrong with his ears. With a swish, another jade sword finger shot out. Yu Lang Lang dodged fiercely. The sword chi meant for his chest hit his shoulder instead, splashing a streak of blood. Ah! Yu Lang Lang roared angrily. His right hand's bare paw's black hairs stood on end like steel needles, followed by a pound downward. Yet, during the pounding motion, his belly got struck by another sword chi. In Duan Yun's eyes, it was because the skill had too long of a startup. With a boom, the bare paw crashed down. The table and the floor shattered. Splinters and pebbles shot out like a fierce storm. With a buzz, Duan Yun drew a cleaver from his medical box and executed a sweeping strike. The water moon's sword energy, like a crescent moon, cleaved through the incoming debris toward Yu Lang Lang, who was trying to escape through a window. Yu Lang Lang was diving towards the window to break out, but then he felt a silver-white sword chi like a crescent moon coming at him, hurriedly raising his hand to block. With a snap, his arm was slashed open, creating a deep gash down to the bone, and his diving body was forced to change direction, smashing heavily against the wall and falling to the ground. At this point, Duan Yun didn't look back and responded with 2 fingers. 2 rushing bear children suddenly clutched their necks and dropped to their knees. Seeing this, several elite members of the Xuanxiong gang, with their childlike ferocity quickly fading from their eyes, hurriedly backed away in fear. Ah! Yu Lang Lang struggled to stand up, only to be hit by another sword finger at his waist. Why? He couldn't help but ask again. "I've already told you, your protection fees are unreasonable," Duan Yun repeated. With a swish, blood splattered. This time it was the throat. Yu Lang Lang, clothed in red, never understood why he was killed until his death. Because of the unreasonable protection fee? Where is the protection fee unreasonable? The remaining gang members inside the room had already peed their pants out of fear. Those close to the door tried to escape, only to hear a loud bang as the doorway was blown apart by a blast of jade sword finger energy, sending splinters flying everywhere. Everyone was so scared that they lay on the ground, holding their heads, daring not to make any sudden moves. "Hero, please spare our lives. Mighty One, please spare our lives. Hero, please spare us." Such a scene reminded Duan Yun of a police and robber movie set. This Xuanxiong gang is too weak. Dare to kill people at will and charge such a high protection fee for this sort of trash? Duan Yun pinched his sword finger and sat down, saying, "It is said that your cultivation technique becomes harder to control your temper the more you practice it."
No. No.
One of the elite members of the Xuanxiong gang denied. With a swish, his voice abruptly stopped as his forehead was pierced by the sword chi. "Liar," Duan Yun said indifferently. "It's true, it's true." The remaining people hurriedly told the truth. Then again, grunting, one of the elites clutched his pierced neck, eyes wide open, and fell to the ground dead. "If you can't change, then there's no need for you to live," Duan Yun said again. "Bastard. I'm going to fight you." One of the tyrants, used to bullying and killing, could not bear it and roared as he charged at Duan Yun. His eyes were bloodshot, like a madman, filled with an imposing aura. A sword chi directly pierced through his throat. He clutched his neck, his face showing pain and fierceness as he looked at Duan Yun. He was so full of hatred. He used to be the one who bullied and killed others, and nobody dared even to fart in front of him. Anyone who did was beaten to death by him. But now, he was so full of hatred. The man clutched his neck and died amidst intense hatred and suffocation. His eyes were wide open, even in death. Duan Yun turned to the last person in the room. Ah! A terrible scream arose as the Xuanxiong gang member chopped off his own right palm with a knife, painfully saying, "This way, my energy will disperse, and I won't lose my temper anymore." Really? Duan Yun lowered his raised finger. He had noticed earlier that this old scribe's palm was the thinnest here, probably also the least proficient in his cultivation. Unable to help himself, Duan Yun asked, "Well, tell me, is the protection fee your Xuanxiong gang charges reasonable?" "No, not reasonable. Why charge if it's unreasonable? It's the gang leader and the county master who wanted us to collect it. I didn't want to. I was kidnapped by them initially. I used to be a scholar too. I had no choice." The old scribe spoke with a trembling voice, his body shaking due to extreme pain. "The county master too? Evidence?" Duan Yun questioned. "Hero, I am the accountant. The protection fee is split 70-30. The county magistrate takes 70%. "Really? Take me to see the account books," Duan Yun said. Gang leader. Gang leader. Damn it. Chun Lauer and the others have been killed by some son of a bitch. They've got several holes in them." A burly man with two others rushed in, then stiffened on the spot. The three saw the gang leader, but he was already dead with eyes wide open, his body no less punctured than Chun Lauer's. The newcomers looked at the room full of corpses, then at the accountant with the severed palm and the masked Duan Yun, stammering, "Is this a bad time for me to arrive?" "No, you've arrived just at the right time." As soon as Duan Yun finished speaking, the newcomer's head was penetrated by the sword chi. Duan Yun recognized this person. He was the one who had said, "What are you looking at?" during the day. Such is fate, indescribably marvelous. Chapter 14. This sword training was not in vain. After that, Duan Yun and the accountant went to check the accounts, leaving only the young cubs dead without closing their eyes. After coming out of the accounting room, Duan Yun confirmed that the county magistrate was also the main culprit behind the unreasonable protection fees. So tonight, he had to go and kill the county magistrate too. Afterward, Duan Yun left. The accountant watched him go. Even now, he was utterly confused, even feeling quite surreal. If it weren't for the severe pain in his severed palm telling him this wasn't a dream, he couldn't understand why someone would kill, then check the accounts and leave. Could it be he really went to kill the county magistrate? But thinking about this person's actions, he felt it was very likely. Where did this demon emerge from? Because the gang leader Yu Lang Lang was discussing matters with the high-level gang members at the time, the ordinary gang members wisely avoided that courtyard. Moreover, they were noisy while drinking, so aside from a few guards who heard the commotion and were instantly killed by Duan Yun, the rest inside were not disturbed. This was also why Duan Yun called the Xuanxiong gang a makeshift troop. The organization was too loose. After Duan Yun left, he killed everyone he encountered on the roads, until his hands became numb. Then he walked towards the outside. When exiting the main gate, the gang member guarding the gate saw Duan Yun and asked, "Doctor, how is the gang leader's illness?" Duan Yun nodded and said, "It's fine now." That's good, the guard said with a happy face. Now it was completely dark. Just like last time when he counter-killed Wang Li, this time Duan Yun still felt the nervous excitement of killing, with adrenaline surging. There was a sense of exhilaration too. If last time killing Wang Li was for self-preservation, this time he was acting for the people, acting for heaven. To be more specific, he was temporarily eliminating an unreasonable fee. The breeze swept over his body, and he felt life fading easily under his fingers. Whether it was any elite member or the red-dressed gang leader of the Xuanxiong gang, they weren't much stronger than the mosquitoes in the latrine. Is this all to the Xuanxiong gang leader? A master? But Duan Yun knew that he had only done half of eradicating the unreasonable fees. He had to proceed with the other half soon. After asking for directions to the county magistrate's mansion, Duan Yun continued on his way. The moon came out. After killing the county magistrate, he still had to go back to eat, practice his sword, a busy night indeed. At night, the county magistrate of Lishui City drank a large cup of dragon tiger wine and then started being busy with his newly married concubine. After 10 breaths, the county magistrate got off the concubine, feeling he still retained his youthful vigor. The concubine gave him a reproachful look and then turned over to sleep. At this moment, a maid's voice came from outside. "Sir, the doctor you requested has arrived." The county magistrate was somewhat baffled and said, "What doctor?" "The urologist." While talking, the door was pushed open. Both the county magistrate and his concubine were startled. The county magistrate reacted quickly. His plump body rolled instantly, protecting the screaming concubine in front of him. "Who are you and what do you want?" "I came to kill you," Duan Yun said seriously. "Why do you want to kill me?" "Because your protection fees are unreasonable." "What?" "People, calm." A flash of white light, and a clear blood hole appeared at the forehead of the county magistrate. Duan Yun withdrew his finger and walked straight out. In the deep night, the courtyard soon filled with the piercing screams of maids and the concubine. The county magistrate lay there, his eyes wide open, even more unwilling to close them in death than the Xuanxiong gang leader Yu Langlang. In his final moment, he even thought it was because of unequal profit-sharing with the Xuanxiong gang. He was the county master, entitled to a 37 split. "Stop!" As Duan Yun walked out, suddenly someone blocked his way. Breaking into the county master mansion. "Why don't you surrender?" The blocker was a skinny man, temples bulging like a pigeon's egg, looking fiercely formidable. "A master!" Duan Yun looked solemn. This must be the toughest opponent he had encountered so far tonight. The thin man was truly a skilled fighter hired by the county magistrate for a hefty price. Not to mention this tiny Lishui town, he even had some reputation in larger cities. If it weren't for old time's sake, he wouldn't even bother to bully around in such a small town. The next moment, the thin man charged over, his robe fluttering loudly, creating an imposing momentum. Duan Yun didn't dare hold back, raising his sword finger and going all out. Under the moonlight, the black-robed thin man showed vigorous energy and agile movements, executing 16 dodging maneuvers within mere moments, but was then pierced 21 times by Duan Yun's sword chi, nearly turning him into a sieve. Looking at him convulsing in a pool of blood, Duan Yun commented, "What's the point of scaring people?" After leaving the county magistrate's residence, Duan Yun went to the riverside, took off all his clothes, shoes, socks, and mask, and set them on fire with a fire stick. Afterward, he changed into the clothes he had brought with him, kicked the ash from his burnt clothes and shoes into the water, and then left along the branching creek. Water is best at washing away traces and scents. Even Duan Yun himself was surprised by how adept he had become at this. It could only be said that the novels and TV shows he watched in his past life provided ample theoretical support. After taking a detour back home, Duan Yun felt hungry. Really hungry. He started cooking noodles. The freshly boiled noodles were served with broth, topped with hot chili oil, sprinkled finely with Sichuan pepper powder and fresh scallions bought during the day, making it delicious and appetizing. Duan Yun enjoyed his meal greatly, and his mood was rather good, because he knew that for now, he wouldn't need to pay those unreasonable protection fees, nor fear the Xuanxiong gang coming after him anymore. His practice with the sword wasn't for nothing. Duan Yun felt exhilarated, an unprecedented exhilaration. So, solving unsolvable problems meant eliminating the people causing those problems, which felt this good. Pretty nice. This lousy world wasn't completely useless after all, because he possessed the power to solve problems. Early next morning, Duan Yun woke up as usual, full of life, took a cold shower, and changed into clean underwear. Like the last time when he killed Wang Li, yesterday he had killed people, many people, and he thought he would have nightmares. But instead, he had a spring dream. Again, with several wives several times over. Unlike last time when he killed the unremarkable Wang Li, by noon the entire Lishui town was all abuzz. Many people had died the previous night, and they were significant figures. The gang leader of the Xuanxiong Wolf Gang, Yu Lang Lang, and the county magistrate Wang Difu had both died violently overnight. One at the gang's residence along with almost everyone else there, the other at his own mansion, changing the underworld and lawful scene of Lishui City drastically. By midday, even the vegetable-selling old ladies were discussing this. Who has such capability to kill all those from the Xuanxiong Wolf Gang and the county magistrate in one night? Who knows? Maybe some passing master? Do we even have such masters in our small place like Lishui City? But a master killing people should have a reason, right? The ones who master martial arts are always extreme. They don't give a damn reason for killing. It's said that the Xuanxiong gang was charging unreasonable protection fees. What? That's a reason to kill? Isn't collecting protection fees a perfectly normal thing? It must be the work of an evil demon. Hey! Don't talk nonsense. Beware of the disaster that comes from loose lips. Will the grandpas of the Xuanxiong gang still collect protection fees next month? The fees were collected on the 15th, and before the 16th came, both the gang leader and the county magistrate were killed. Who would dare to collect now? Ah! Really no one left to collect. What are we supposed to do now? For a time, there was widespread anxiety. Listening to these people's conversations, Duan Yun couldn't help but frown. It was apparent that these neighbors had gotten used to the protection fees, so much so that they felt uneasy without them. They would need some time to adjust. Friends who often kill know that after committing a murder, there's always the urge to revisit the crime scene. Duan Yun was no exception. He went back and joined the crowd to watch the hustle and bustle. To his surprise, he saw a familiar face. That divine catcher from the Qingqi Bureau. He wasn't sure if she was the older sister or younger sister. This caused Duan Yun some concern. Perhaps these sisters might have a way to find him? Chapter 15. Demonstrating the compassion of a bodhisattva with thunderbolt methods. On the day the goddess constable arrived, Lishui City was put under lockdown. However, Duan Yun wasn't very panicked and calmly waited for the storm to pass. He hadn't intended to leave so early anyway, and fleeing hastily would only make him more suspect. If he could still be found after erasing his traces so thoroughly, running farther would probably be useless. Better to conserve his energy. Moreover, he reasoned, why should he flee when he had done nothing wrong? He had eliminated the Xuanxiong gang precisely to avoid hiding and skulking, and he killed the county magistrate to prevent unreasonable levies. Should the goddess constable insist on capturing him for it, he wouldn't mind seizing them and locking them in a cellar to share his side of the story, appealing to their emotions and reasoning. As for whether he could match the goddess constable from the Qingqi Bureau, Duan Yun wasn't entirely sure. He couldn't help but analyze. Neither the experts of the Xuanxiong gang nor those of the county magistrate mansion were his match, and they hadn't even forced him to use Embrace Sparrowtail. So he doubted the goddess constable would fare any better. Not even the two sisters working together would suffice. This, indeed, gave him the opportunity to capture and reason with them. Of course, Duan Yun didn't wish for such a thing to happen. Imprisoning the goddess constable would make him resemble the demon in The Fall of the Goddess Constable, whereas he was a gynecologist known for his medical practitioner's compassionate heart. Since protection money was no longer being collected, Duan Yun casually opened his herbal shop. He wasn't carrying much money, so earning a little was better than nothing. He felt some regret for being so focused on eliminating the protection fees that he forgot to pick up money from the bodies of the deceased Xuanxiong gang members. Now that the goddess catcher had arrived, it was more improper for him to pick it up, and surely others had already scavenged most of it. According to the gossip he heard, after he decimated the Xuanxiong gang, the few remaining fools fought each other over their accounts and then vanished. Looking at his modest and deserted shop, Duan Yun once again felt his career as a gynecologist was somewhat of a failure. Barely 2 regular customers. His father left too abruptly, and he, being too young and not trusted, coupled with the low demand for gynecology, lacked customers, which was somewhat understandable. Thinking about the effects of jade sword stance and breathing exercises, Duan Yun considered whether to take on treating kidney deficiencies as a side job. That prospect certainly had a broader audience. As dusk approached, Duan Yun stood up to close the shop, but someone rushed in just as he was halfway through the door. "Dr. Duan, my young master requests your immediate assistance to save a life." Duan Yun recognized the servant. He was from the Zhao family in the west of the city. Young Master Zhao and young Madame Zhao were among the few regular clients he had. Before young Madame Zhao's marriage, her mother had highly regarded the medical skills of Duan Yun's father. Hence, she had always been fond of the Duan family's herbal shop. After marrying young Master Zhao and becoming the young Madame, and even when she was pregnant, she didn't mind the inexperienced young Dr. Duan attending her several times. It was after treating young Madame Zhao that Duan Yun got into trouble on his way to buy vegetables. Recalling the events, Duan Yun realized that most of the respect he felt as a gynecologist came from young Master Zhao and young Madame Zhao. One could say they were the most precious and important clients of his medical career. Duan Yun promptly asked, "What happened?" "The madam can't give birth, and the midwife is out of methods. The young master has heard that you talked about a procedure called cesarean section and specifically sent for you to come." The servant seemed extremely anxious, nearly crying, which suggested that the situation was dire. Duan Yun had learned about cesarean sections, but even old Dr. Gu, who passed down the method, never actually performed one in his lifetime. Boasting would have to reach back to some ancestor. However, now Duan Yun wanted to try. Performing a cesarean, stopping bleeding, and suturing were all technical tasks. They might have been overwhelming challenges for him in the past, but now he had practiced swordplay and even taken lives. Moreover, he had already validated the ancestral cesarean technique with medical knowledge from his past life, believing it to be largely feasible. "Dr. Duan, hurry. If we delay any further, the lady will be lost," the servant said with a sobbing voice. Without hesitation, Duan Yun grabbed his medical bag and 2 knives, replying, "Lead the way." The servant quickly ran ahead, with Duan Yun following, who then ended up carrying the servant as they raced on. In a moment, the servant felt as if they were slicing through the wind, and the rushing air blurred his eyes. Could young Dr. Duan really run this fast? It didn't take long to arrive at Zhao's mansion. "Dr. Duan has arrived. Dr. Duan has arrived," the servant called out while trotting. Then, a young man clad in blue rushed to meet them, anxiously saying, "Dr. Duan, my lady." Duan Yun responded, "Let's assess the situation first." Young Master Zhao hurriedly led him to an adjacent room. Inside, maids and a midwife stood by the bed, drenched in sweat, and on the bed lay a young woman nearly unconscious. Duan Yun observed the situation and knew the laboring woman no longer had the strength to give birth naturally. A cesarean was required. Yet he was somewhat nervous. After all, this was his first time. Beside him, young Master Zhao, seeing his wife's faint state, urgently asked, "Dr. Duan, what do we do?" The midwife, noticing the youth of the doctor summoned by young Master Zhao, quickly warned, "Don't mess this up, or we'll lose both mother and child." Duan Yun solemnly said, "Dragging this out will surely lose them both. A cesarean is necessary." "What? A cesarean?" The midwife was taken aback. She had been delivering babies in the city for many years and had never heard of such a method used by respectable people. "I must see the lady," the midwife exclaimed excitedly. "Shut up." Duan Yun said one sentence, then turned to young Master Zhao and said, "Young Master Zhao, I cannot guarantee success. It's your decision whether to proceed or not." Young Master Zhao, wiping the sweat from his forehead, clenched his teeth and said, "Do it. All right, you stay behind and have the servants prepare hot water, scissors, needles, and thread," Duan Yun ordered. Faced with the young madam on the brink of death, he knew he could no longer delay. The blade was heated on the flames, giving off a cold light. Just like when practicing with a sword, once Duan Yun began, he entered a state of utter focus. The chilling blade touched the woman's swollen belly in an instant, and with one slice, Duan Yun's hands were remarkably steady, and his knife moved swiftly, as if it were a flash of lightning. The moment a 6-inch incision appeared, Duan Yun's hand was already inside. Inside the room, the midwife and young master Zhao dared not even breathe loudly, while the maidservant had already been frightened into trembling and couldn't bear to watch any longer. Outside, the old lady paced back and forth frantically. She always felt that the doctor her son had hired was not very reliable. Too young. The experienced midwife that she had hired was unable to do anything, so what could this barely grown doctor do? But suddenly, the cry of a newborn baby rang out sharply, causing the old woman's pacing to freeze in place. Was it birth? Was the child born? Skillfully cutting the umbilical cord, Duan Yun was immersed in the fluidity of the process. He held the newborn baby, who had just been coaxed into crying with a pat, while he sewed up the young madam with his other hand. At that moment, he said to the shocked midwife beside him, "Here, take the child." After the midwife hastily took the child, Duan Yun was already knotting the end of the thread. After this practice, Duan Yun realized some of the plots in martial arts novels were not purely fabricated. For example, after striking a quick sword to seal the throat, it would take a short while for the person to react before a faint bloodline would appear on the throat. If the blade was swift and sharp enough, the cut would be very narrow and might not even cause much pain immediately. After suturing the incision, Duan Yun began to wash his hands. Listening to the baby's cries and the relatively stable breathing of the woman beside him, he felt that he was indeed a qualified obstetrician that day. No, not just qualified, but excellent. Young Master Zhao looked at his wife's belly, now stitched with a bow tie knot, and suddenly burst into tears. Tears of extreme joy. He and Duan Yun were not familiar with each other. It had been the young madam's idea to let young Dr. Duan come to provide medical treatment. And this time, too, it had been the young madam's intention before she fell unconscious. Actually, it was a gamble to entrust the lives of his wife and child to a young doctor, and it wasn't easy. It required great pressure to bear. Luckily, they had bet correctly. Young Dr. Duan was truly a trustworthy and good doctor. The lady needs to rest quietly, eat well, and not catch a cold. I will come to remove the stitches in 5 days, Duan Yun said gently as he took the pulse. He could feel the joy of the family. He was also quite pleased. This was probably the most fulfilling day of his career as a doctor so far. That sense of achievement peaked when he received 50 taels of silver as a medical fee. The servant, seeing that Duan Yun was in a good mood after receiving the medical fee, couldn't help but smile stupidly. It really was a false alarm today. He thought the lady and the young master were really gone. Indeed, many things in life are no more beautiful than the phrase, a false alarm. Duan Yun patted the servant's shoulder and congratulated young Master Zhao before he left. The sky was drizzling, and Duan Yun walked briskly along the way. He suddenly realized that saving people also made him quite happy, even happier than killing someone a few days ago. In his mind, he involuntarily recalled a saying from his previous life. With thunderous methods, reveal a benevolent heart. His methods were not thunderous, and his heart was not that of a bodhisattva, but he still managed to do what he wanted with his own strength. All these changes were thanks to that secret book he bought for a dime. Without the Jade Sword True Understanding, he might still be a nodding, barely surviving gynecologist at present. Thinking of the straightforward annotations in the secret book, Duan Yun felt a touch of warmth. Clearly, the predecessor who wrote those annotations had the heart of a bodhisattva and wanted the secret book to be passed down, thereby changing the lives of many more people. He was one of the beneficiaries. Duan Yun had decided that he would do the same in the future. He would also spread the teachings of the Jade Sword True Understanding, which he, a sword Tao prodigy, had perfected, and which were not lacking in power. Then there would be many good people in the world like him. In that case, evil would be suppressed, and good would be promoted. As Duan Yun walked on the way home, a nascent concept of medical practitioner's compassionate heart, spreading martial arts to the world, gradually took shape in his mind. Chapter 16. Self-created swordsmanship. Breaking body sword energy. Returning home, Duan Yun showed a relieved smile on his face, thinking of the successful cesarean birth he had just accomplished. At night, he felt somewhat excited. He had not expected to derive such a sense of accomplishment from practicing medicine. It was not unlike the satisfaction he felt after eradicating the unreasonable tolls, slaying everyone in Xuanxiong Gang, and the county magistrate. With a swoosh, Duan Yun swept his sword. A surge of water moon sword energy rolled out, slicing down the nearby mosquitoes. He was getting better and better at controlling the sword chi. In fact, Duan Yun's life had improved quite a bit by practicing swordsmanship. For example, before heading to the latrine, he would massacre the mosquitoes inside, thereby obtaining a more comfortable environment for his business. Yet, the mosquitoes this night were relentless in their harassment. Both Water Moon Sword Energy and Jade Sword Finger could cut down mosquitoes, but ultimately it was troublesome. Whether by extending his finger or drawing his sword, it seemed like an overreaction and disrupted his sleep. A mosquito net could solve the problem, but it wasn't always available or usable, such as when sleeping in the wilderness. So why not invent a sword technique specifically to deal with this situation? Yes, invent a sword technique. When Duan Yun thought of this, he excitedly sat up from his bed. Creating a sword technique is a very difficult task. After all, the emergence of any excellent method condenses the wisdom of countless predecessors. Duan Yun looked solemn. This was his first time attempting to create a sword technique, and even he, a 1 in 10,000 sword Dao prodigy, felt the pressure, ready for an all-nighter. Jade Sword True Understanding consisted of 4 moves, of which only the last 3 were for combat. During this period of cultivation, he had mastered the control over Jade Sword Finger and Water Moon Sword Energy. For instance, when he used Water Moon Sword Energy to kill mosquitoes before, he would also damage the walls, but now he could ensure only the mosquitoes were slain without harming the walls. After all, Jade Sword Finger and Water Moon Sword Energy both involved condensing Jade Sword True Chi into Sword Chi and channeling it through specific paths. These fixed paths, presumably, were the optimal routes summarized by countless ancestors, offering stable output and impressive power. However, such a forceful Sword Chi was unnecessary to kill mosquitoes. Could he try quickly condensing Jade Sword True Chi into Sword Chi, not through fixed paths but from any part of the body that might be bitten by mosquitoes? With previous successful experiences, Duan Yun decided to give it a try. It was rather difficult, as the paths of Jade Sword Finger and Water Moon Sword Energy were indeed smooth. Now, to seek alternative paths would meet obstructions and require precise generation and control of Sword Chi. Duan Yun kept trying. After an hour, faint traces of Sword Chi began to seep out from his body. His own sword moved slowly, progressing through constant attempts. It was hard. Very hard. 3 hours later, Duan Yun stopped. He walked into the privy, where 2 mosquitoes that just came near were sliced by streams of Sword Chi erupting from his abdomen and shoulder. Following that, his arms, thighs, buttocks, even his forehead and eyebrows, were able to successfully produce tiny Sword Chi to kill mosquitoes. While relieving himself, Duan Yun killed more than a dozen mosquitoes. Then he went to the grave of Wang Li, where more strands of Sword Chi swirled around his legs. The delicate Sword Chi emerged like threads, instantly piercing holes through the grave grass, shattering it. Only then did Duan Yun exhale deeply, saying, "Finally, success!" He had spent 3 full hours pondering and practicing to create this sword move. It showed the difficulty of creating one's own sword technique. Duan Yun thought he should name this first self-created sword move of his. He opened his palm and the fine Sword Chi burst forth like endless spring rain. Since it emerges from the body, let's call it breaking body sword energy. Duan Yun believed that there was great potential for further development in this move. Although this breaking body sword energy was as fine as threads and far less powerful than Water Moon Sword Energy and Jade Sword Finger, the cumulative effects could be significant. As long as he kept practicing, allowing his flesh and pores to fully adapt to this minor Sword Chi, he might even be able to create a mist of swords. A quantitative change leading to a qualitative transformation, the future looks promising. If this technique is perfected, the probability of capturing the Goddess Catcher Sisters could rise from 78% to over 90%. Inside the mortuary, Leng Yiming, the youngest goddess catcher of the current Qingqi Bureau, gazed at the body and lapsed into deep thought. Beside her, a subordinate nervously said, "Boss, these are all deaths by sword finger. What level of mastery is this?" Leng Yiming folded her arms across her chest, analyzing, "A level that I surely can't beat. Anyway, should we still investigate the case?" the subordinate asked. "Investigate, but if we can't find anything, then so be it. Also, there's no need to lock down the city. It's a waste of resources," Leng Yiming replied. The subordinate was somewhat surprised by her answer, because from the tone of the higher-ups, he sensed caution and even a hint of unease. In their eyes, their boss Leng Yiming wasn't as obsessively thorough with cases as her sister Leng Yixue, but she was still an astonishingly talented and daring genius, with numerous experiences of tracking down murderers alone, which is why she became the youngest goddess catcher in the Bureau. Especially when the two sisters joined forces, they were invincible. But now, the boss's intentions were quite clear. She was hoping not to find any results, or rather, she was reluctant to encounter that murderer. The reason Leng Yiming felt this way was her awareness of the danger involved. This case had claimed many lives, and while it didn't have the highest body count compared to others she'd handled, the reason the killer had given was terrifying. The protection racket was not reasonable. Killing off a gang that collected protection fees due to unreasonable fees seemed a bit mad. According to descriptions from survivors, the murderer had actually checked the accounts for protection fees with the Xuanqiong gang's accountant, and then went on to kill the county magistrate who also collected protection fees. Ordinary evil demons wouldn't give her such a perverse feeling. Furthermore, the fear that this horrific sword finger strategy instilled in the normally fearless goddess catcher was something she couldn't help but feel deep down. Leng Yiming was well aware that there were many banned leisure books in the martial world, depicting stories of beautiful goddess catchers being captured by demons and locked in dark dungeons where unspeakable things happened. These stories had their prototypes. There was once a predecessor goddess catcher in the Qingqi Bureau who, in investigating a case, had a brief conversation with a well-known demon, and then, she was taken. Kept in captivity for 20 years, she bore the demon 3 children, and it wasn't until the children grew up and began to turn against their father that she found a chance to escape his clutches. According to the predecessor, the demon had never realized his own wrongdoings, constantly believing that their love was genuine and that they were leading an enviable fairy tale life. If anyone objected to this, it was deemed jealousy, an attempt to ruin his marriage, and he would kill and torment her as well as himself. The demon was convinced that causing mutual suffering kept the marriage fresh, ensuring that they would always remember each other deeply and never part. What was perceived as happiness and love by the demon was an endless nightmare for the former goddess catcher, who would often tremble uncontrollably as if broken, even after escaping. Paranoia, extremism, living eternally within one's own rationalizations, commanding immense strength and using extraordinary methods. These were the hallmarks of such demons. And now, this murderer, who committed violence due to unreasonable protection fees, seemed to fit the bill. It is known that protection fees exist everywhere, and it's rare to consider them unreasonable. Leng Yiming did not wish to end up like those nearly broken predecessor goddess catchers. Her sister would arrive in a few days. Then they, as sisters, could join forces. No, that was wrong. There are demons who might particularly like sisters like them. She couldn't help but think, could this demon still be in the city, quietly watching her? At the thought, a chill ran down Leng Yiming's spine. What Duan Yun didn't realize was that while he worried about the goddess catcher finding him, that very goddess catcher was also afraid of finding him. Ironically, on the 4th day, the goddess catcher indeed came. Chapter 17 Shadow Woman. Leng Yiming walked on the street, continuously pondering one question. What would happen if she encountered the demon involved in this murder? The most obvious outcome would be getting killed. She definitely was no match for this demon. Currently, she was in the upper realm of Qi realm, having cultivated a pure and refined true Qi, considered astonishingly talented among her peers. Yet, the tributor from the county magistrate mansion who had died was also in the Qi realm. Martial artists of the Qi realm had true Qi that protected their bodies, Ordinary hidden weapons could hardly break through their flesh, yet that tributor had been riddled with holes. The technique used was even the extremely difficult to master sword finger. This at the very least was from the Tongyu realm above the Qixi, and decidedly not the initial realm. Joined by her sister, she could barely reach the standard of the initial Tongyu realm. This meant even if she joined forces with her sister, they wouldn't stand a chance against the opponent. Besides being killed, the only other possibility was being captured and then tortured. The reason this demon kills, and the fact that he seriously audited the accounts before killing the county magistrate, had a sense of seeming propriety but actually being absurdly deranged. Such a person could do anything, and histories of miserably ended goddess catchers in the Qingqi Bureau had encountered just these kinds of reasonable demons. In the martial world, there are many stronger evil demons than Lang Yiming. What's frightening is those who are both strong and deranged. As a goddess catcher, being captured by such a demon and toyed with and tormented, it's really hard to imagine, especially when this demon's fingers were highly deadly. Thinking of this, Lang Yiming felt the skies of this small city darken a lot. She was scared, yet the responsibility as a goddess catcher forced her to complete the process. Lang Yiming walked on the street, not as bold and proactive as she had been when investigating earlier. She once, irritated by a murderer's methods, went 5 days and nights without sleep, thoroughly searching a city of over 10,000, and eventually found the murderer's accomplishments in a dark gutter. But this time, she just intended to go through the process quickly and leave. When she saw that goddess catcher, Duan Yun was compounding medicine. The supplement was for young Madame Zhao. He now likely had the capability to imprison this goddess catcher, but he still felt worried. What if, after imprisonment, this stubborn goddess catcher wouldn't be convinced by his reasoning? He surely couldn't kill this epitome of justice, right? After all, Duan Yun was fundamentally a gynecologist with a medical practitioner's compassionate heart, and he wouldn't kill without reason, especially not this sort of rare good person. Afterward, providing her with food and accommodation would inevitably be troublesome. Duan Yun couldn't help but put down the pestle he used for pounding medicine and started observing the activities outside. The posture of this goddess catcher suggested she was patrolling and investigating, not that she was here specifically for him. However, Duan Yun had also prepared to imprison her at any moment since the cellar had been repaired just last night. Last time he observed her, this goddess catcher was wearing the usual style of tough clothes, but this time, she was donned in what looked strikingly like the uniform of the flying fish robe. Duan Yun quite liked that uniform, having rapidly mastered the embrace sparrowtail, inspired by that snug, professional uniform. The uniform, combined with the goddess catcher's tall ponytail, made her look strikingly dashing. Of course, it also made her chest look even bigger. Duan Yun sat at the door, quietly observing her. He couldn't help but become more curious about the outside world. The craftsmanship of just the clothing on this goddess catcher was far superior to anything he had seen before. One couldn't find such quality of clothing in neither Lishui City nor the Qingcha market. What was the outside world really like? At this moment, a purple-clothed constable beside Lang Yiming said, "Chief, the one sitting at the door of the pharmacy, is a gynecologist. The murderer had impersonated a doctor twice to commit murders, which was worth their attention." Lang Yiming glanced at Duan Yun at the doorway and straightforwardly denied, "It's not him." "Why?" asked the purple-clothed subordinate. "He dares to blatantly stare at my chest. His conscience must be clear." Lang Yiming provided her rationale. "I see." The purple-clothed constable found it quite reasonable and hurriedly noted it down. Men who dare to openly stare at their leader's chest are generally not the murderer. At this moment, Lang Yiming, however, stopped in her tracks and looked back. It was because she just realized she had seen this gynecologist before. Duan Yun also gave her a gentle smile. "You go ahead. I'll ask about the situation." After instructing, Lang Yiming walked straight towards Duan Yun. "So it's you," Lang Yiming said. Duan Yun responded, "Divine Catcher. It's me." He had confirmed from the gap in the other's garment that this was the Shadow Sister. "Is this your pharmacy?" Lang Yiming asked doubtfully. Duan Yun said, "It was passed down from my father." "So you're a doctor. No wonder you said back then that my sister's temper is fiercer than mine," Lang Yiming said coldly. Duan Yun took the initiative. "Divine Catcher, are you here to investigate the county magistrate's case?" Lang Yiming nodded. "Yes." Duan Yun then said, "I heard from the neighbors that the murderer is quite formidable." "It's not just formidable. How does it compare to the red building fairy I encountered that day?" "The red building fairy is not even worth mentioning." "Isn't that very dangerous?" "That is naturally so." Compared to her sister Lang Yixue, Lang Yiming is actually somewhat talkative. Otherwise, she wouldn't have shared so much knowledge of the martial world with Duan Yun that night. These past few days, the thought that the demon might still be around made Lang Yiming feel immense pressure. Thus, she really wanted to talk to someone to relieve some of that stress. But her sister was not around, and there were many things she couldn't speak to her subordinates about. However, this young doctor before her seemed like a good candidate, because the man in front of her was pleasing to look at, which could make her feel joyful, and also because they were acquaintances, yet not from the same world. Just like she had initially told him, "You don't have to ask my name. Even if you did, I wouldn't tell you. It would only lead you to vain imaginations. Although you look fine, you are not a match for me. My family wouldn't agree, and I wouldn't like you." People from different worlds, thus speaking her mind came with fewer concerns. This murderer is very sinister. Not just a common evil demon, but a truly extreme demon, Lang Yiming confided. Duan Yun questioned, "Is it really that extreme? It feels quite ordinary compared to the red building fairy." "Damn, I'm acting as an avenger in the name of justice, and I'm labeled a demon by this shadow woman." He was tempted to poke her over with one finger, then lock her in a cellar for a good talking to, or rather, to rationally discuss things. Lang Yiming sighed. "You don't understand demons, nor the terror of such demons. Should I tell you that the broken prototypes of goddess catchers in those banned books came from encounters with these kinds of demons? All right, I've got things to do. Don't tell anyone what we talked about today," Lang Yiming reminded. "Okay. Also, your name is Duan Yun." "Yes. But I still won't tell you my name, same reason, gynecologist." Afterward, Lang Yiming left. Duan Yun watched the retreating figure of this goddess catcher, feeling this woman was becoming more and more shadow. "Who the hell is interested in your name? Also, my act of eliminating unreasonable fees, if not a heroic deed of punishing the wicked and supporting justice, couldn't possibly qualify as demonic, right?" For a moment, Duan Yun had the urge to abduct her for a debate, but he held back. His misunderstanding came from not doing enough heroic deeds, not grand enough. Once his undertaking of medical practitioner's compassionate heart, spreading martial arts across the world, was accomplished and renowned, everything would change. Then, this shadow woman hearing of my name in the future would surely feel ashamed of today's misunderstanding. Yes, he Duan Yun would neither change his name nor his dignity, determined to be a cleansing force in this murderous and adulterous world. At that moment, Duan Yun's desire to purge the filth of the human world, spread martial arts globally, became even clearer. Chapter 18 Big Medicine is ready. Thinking of what the goddess catcher had said, Duan Yun actually felt somewhat relieved. Relieved that she could share so much heartfelt conversation with him, indicating she wasn't specifically targeting him. Otherwise, had a conflict really occurred, he might have ended up locking her in the cellar, needlessly complicating matters. A few days later, the goddess catcher left. Duan Yun reckoned it was about time for him to leave as well. After he had decimated the Xuanxiong gang, the remaining bunch of nobodies, entangled by their interests, fought among themselves twice more before disappearing completely. The sudden death of the county magistrate meant that it would be some time before his successor arrived. So, the town was left as it was. However, the residents of the town were gradually coming to their senses. Life became much easier without anyone fighting and killing, without anyone arrogantly lording over them, and without anyone collecting protection money. They were no longer living like beasts of burden. Still, Many found it hard to adjust to the change and felt something was amiss. Was this the life they were meant to lead? Duan Yun sometimes reflected on how, just 3 months prior, he was being shaken down for protection money, kicked around in unruly fashion, bitten by mosquitoes in the latrine, and feeling as if every corner of the place posed a challenge. But now the challenges were gone. He dealt with those who caused them. He felt a tinge of loneliness. In this tiny town, there were no peers in his field, and business as a gynecologist was awfully slow. Duan Yun decided it was time to take a look around. He wasn't one to hold grudges. Yet he needed an opportunity to cleanly kill off that red house fairy, so as not to worry about being ambushed while roaming the martial world. And then there was the author Fairy Ziyu, who had fed him half a book of crap. If he ever met her, he would definitely vent his pent-up frustration on her. As for where the red house was located, and whether the author Fairy Ziyu of The Fall of the Goddess Constable had actually gone into hiding, Duan Yun had no clue. But after all, he wasn't one to hold grudges. He decided to first head to Wangchun City to see what it was like, because he felt that there, he could better fulfill his humble aspirations of medical practitioner's compassionate heart, spreading martial arts to the world. Wangchun City was a truly large city, rumored to be replete with martial arts schools and sects, and with a populace large enough that even a gynecologist could flourish. His father had once aspired to visit that city but had never managed to make the trip before his death. The world was too full of evil and depravity, murder and assault. Traveling was indeed dangerous for the common folk. Each town seemed like an isolated island, where one could easily encounter mishaps on the road unless they were strong enough, which is why most residents of Lishui town never left their birthplace even once in their lives. Now he had the capital and the means to witness the broader world. Thinking about the wider world outside, more peers in the martial arts to interact with, an environment more conducive for spreading his martial arts and compassionate heart. And of course, the evil Red House fairy waiting for him to eradicate, Duan Yun grew restless. Yes, it would also be nice to see more beautiful women. There weren't many beauties in Lishui City. He, a gynecologist, dared to make such a statement. At night, Duan Yun continued to practice the Jade Pillar skill under the moon, enhancing the true qi within his body. The growth of his Jade Sword true qi had hit a plateau, and its speed had slowed considerably compared to before, but Duan Yun kept practicing. If before his true qi's explosive increase was dozens of times that of the Xuanqiang gang's followers, for instance, practicing for 3 months being equivalent to their 10 years, now his rate of progress was probably only about 10 times theirs. Although tenfold wasn't as cost-effective, it was still tolerable considering. Even the tiniest mosquito is still meat. Better to have some than none. In less than 3 months, Duan Yun went from being kicked around like a ball by a member of the Xuanqiang gang to annihilating them completely, all thanks to these small, accumulated efforts. Elsewhere, the twin brothers were practicing Jade Sword stance, their nostrils flaring with excitement. The younger one looked utterly astonished. "Brother, it smells so good. This big medicine is likely to grow much faster now." "Indeed it will. So, should we set out? If this big medicine gets too old, the taste won't be as pure, and it won't be as easy to absorb." "All right, we'll leave in 2 days. We're really lucky. This harvest is coming much sooner than expected. We've really struck gold, ha ha ha." The two identically looking uncles laughed heartily, their faces full of heroic spirit. Duan Yun had no relatives or friends in Lishui City, and his interactions with neighbors were minimal since, in their eyes, a gynecologist wasn't exactly a respectable doctor. If one were to insist he had friends, it would only be the young Mr. Zhao and his wife, his first experience of the joy of saving others. After that, there were no more. Regarding this relatively isolated town, aside from an old house not requiring rent, he felt more like a passerby. So, when Duan Yun decided to leave, he only said goodbye to the Zhao couple. After hearing of his departure, young Mr. Zhao's eyes reddened momentarily. "Dr. Duan, I even thought of asking you to be the godfather to my child, for it was you who saved his life." Duan Yun patted his shoulder and said with a carefree air, "It was his good fortune, and now I too will seek my own fortune." Afterward, He left in a carefree manner, while the Zhao family clamored to give him travel funds, all of which he refused. He, Duan Yun, a one-in-a-million sword Dao prodigy, a terminator of unreasonable fees, would never be poor no matter what. In fact, with the 50 taels of silver paid by young Mr. Zhao for the medical bill, Duan Yun was not too poor anymore. When he set off, he even bought a gray donkey. Why didn't he buy a horse? Because horses were too expensive, costing more than 10 times the price of this gray donkey, not to mention the care they required was costly, often needing eggs and quality feed. Furthermore, although horses were faster than donkeys, they were nowhere near as hardy. Besides, if the donkey were to falter, donkey meat buns would still be delicious. For Duan Yun, buying a horse was like buying an ancestor, a bother, whereas this gray donkey, though not fast, was much less trouble. So what, are you only a hero if you ride a horse, and not if you ride a donkey? When Duan Yun set off, he did so with ambitious aspirations. The gray donkey seemed to sense its master's mood, its hooves briskly moving. With the donkey's hard work, Duan Yun managed to arrive at Qingcha Market just before dark with some persuasive words. He went to notify the landlord about the wall and the side room. To his surprise, the landlord didn't investigate further and even returned his deposit. The house was old and I was planning to demolish it anyway. You've saved me the trouble? Landlord oldly said with gratitude on his face. Duan Yun had braced for a loss of silver but didn't expect such an ending. It was a reward for acting for heaven, accidentally saving the other party the effort to demolish the building, while the landlord did not take the opportunity to extort money. A rare good person indeed. For a moment, Duan Yun looked at this previously moody landlord with newfound respect. Appearances can be deceiving. There are still many good people in this world. After seeing Duan Yun leave satisfactorily, old Li's back was covered in cold sweat. Terrified, he feared becoming like that human bear. Not to mention most who are skilled in martial arts tend to have bad tempers and like to engage in deceit and murder. But even the way Duan Yun opened up the bear man's head for observation that day frightened old Li to the core. He even had a dream the previous night, imagining this tenant opening his head for inspection, just like he did with that bear. He woke up from the dream in sheer terror. His fear just now stemmed from the concern that the dream might become real. For now, this tenant seemed to be quite a decent person. After all, he didn't open up his head to study it, nor did he kill his entire family. The next day, Duan Yun had a bowl of oil tea and continued on his journey. As the gray donkey got further and further away from Qingcha Market and Lishui City, Duan Yun felt somewhat wistful yet also excited. He was melancholic about all the familiar things he was leaving behind and excited for the newness that awaited. He would see a broader world, cultivate stronger martial arts, become a better gynecologist, and even aspired to spread the jade sword true understanding like his predecessors, to propagate martial arts across the world. In a small farmyard, a cast iron pot contained only a few drops of broth and something resembling a skin sack. The predecessors on Duan Yun's mind, brothers Hua Wen and Hua Wu, both had their hands in the pot. Strands of black aura crawled up their arms, while the skin sack in the pot grew increasingly shriveled and entangled with hair. In the dimly lit environment, the scene was eerie and terrifying. At this moment, the younger brother Hua Wu withdrew his hands, complaining, "This medicine has no taste, and to think how the young cannot bear hardship." Hua Wen also pulled out his hands, flamboyantly shaking off the liquid, saying, "The world is full of lazy people by the millions. This is the norm, showing how precious good medicine is." Hua Wu couldn't help but say, "Brother, after this appetizer, we must hurry on our way. Only with that big medicine can we brothers enhance our sword chi even further." Hua Wu burst into a hearty laugh. He raised his right hand and performed a jade sword finger technique. With a bang, a hole exploded in the earthen wall, yet it did not penetrate completely. Looking at the hole, Hua Wen pondered. Indeed, only by consuming that big medicine can we advance further and secure our footing. In this martial world, it is hard to be a commoner, even harder to be a hero like us. Chapter 19. Deities? Monsters? Teletubbies? On the journey to Wangchun City these past few days, Duan Yu felt everything was fresh and beautiful. Even though the roads were overgrown with wild grass and trees, and he could barely see another soul for half the day, there was a sense of loneliness that felt like he could be swallowed by the wilderness at any moment. The next day, he even missed a town and once again camped in the wilderness, dining on the wind and drinking the dew. Yet he had no complaints about anything, because he felt that this world, as desolate as it was just like him, full of unlimited potential and at the cusp of great prospects. For instance, right now he was riding a donkey while eating grapes and humming a tune, completely at ease, when suddenly the donkey brayed. It had gone lame. Duan Yun hurried down from the donkey's back, and only then did he notice many small holes in the muddy road. What creatures had made these holes he did not know. They were about the size of a bowl and seemed bottomless, some of their surfaces concealed by wild grass and quite unremarkable. His gray donkey had accidentally stepped into one of them, injuring its leg. He had spent 16 pieces of silver on this gray donkey, nearly a third of his fortune, and it had lame legs in less than 5 days. It was almost as if, in his previous life, he had bought a new car only for it to be in a serious accident before he could even drive it properly. One could say it was bad luck. Duan Yu knew that if a horse carelessly injured its leg and wasn't treated properly, its value could drop to a third of the original. But what about a donkey? If this donkey wasn't well taken care of and truly became lame, it might also face a similar loss in value. In that case, it would be better off served as donkey meat in a bun. Duan Yun checked and found that it probably hadn't broken a bone, so he slowly led the donkey along. Over the past few days, the gray donkey had carried him diligently, and he had adapted to the rhythm of riding. Naturally, he was hesitant to just use it for donkey meat in a bun. He only hoped this sturdy gray donkey could gradually recover. From there, the road, apart from those tricky little holes, was lined on both sides with grass as tall as a person. When the wind blew, it seemed to hide many terrifying things. Because of the lame donkey, they couldn't walk fast, and midway through, there was even a comedic scene of gynecologist Duan Yun carrying the donkey and trotting along. Yet, this man and his donkey still couldn't make it to the next stop. There was neither village ahead nor shop behind. Besides the occasional peculiar deserted statues along the roadside, there was not a trace of human activity. Seeing that it was getting dark, Duan Yun knew that tonight he would once again have to camp out in the wilderness. But now he was not opposed to camping out, because he had already gone through the ordeal the day before yesterday. His breaking body sword energy had become more skilled, and he didn't fear the ferocious mosquitoes in the wilderness. Having passed along that overgrown roadside, the terrain ahead thankfully opened up considerably. Duan Yun led the gray donkey up to a slope, letting it graze while he went to gather branches for a fire. He quickly noticed there were others resting below the slope. Because it was getting dark, he could only see dimly, spotting 2 horse-drawn carriages and several figures near a campfire. They seemed to be merchants transporting goods, who, for some reason, were also camping here. Not until the fire was lit did the people over there notice his presence. Duan Yun pondered whether to go over and say hello. After all, being polite is standard practice when you're on the road, much like how people in martial world often bow and say, "Big brother, you're awesome." But he was a bit socially anxious, given that it was his first long journey and he didn't know what to say. If he didn't want to talk, then he wouldn't. Yes, he was no longer the office worker who had to consider everything. He could now live more freely. To live like an office worker even after transmigrating would be a waste of transformation. What he wanted was freedom and ease. Thinking this, Duan Yun couldn't help but feel relaxed and happy again. Having taken out the Xuanxiong gang, he now felt a sense of relief. Now that he had the gray donkey to carry his luggage, Duan Yun found that the tools he had for preparing dinner were much more abundant than before. He poured water from the water bag into the iron pot, and after the water boiled, he put in slices of meat and tomatoes. Along with the blazing flames, a small pot of tomato and meat soup was ready. Duan Yun took out the white bread he bought the day before yesterday, and with each sip of soup and bite of bread, he felt nourished both body and soul. Indeed, in this area, having a hot soup and a piece of bread and meat is truly a rare delight for those on a journey. Duan Yun did not go over to greet the others. Instead, someone from the caravan came over. The three who came all had swords hanging by their sides and seemed to be trained. Seeing the sword by Duan Yun's side, the leader cupped his hands and said, "I am Huang Li. Where might the young hero be heading?" Duan Yun answered truthfully, "To Wangchun City. My donkey has a lame leg, which has delayed my travel." Seeing that the gray donkey indeed had a lame leg, the visitor couldn't help but say, "That's truly bothering. Meeting is fate. This is a local specialty from our master, a small token of appreciation. I hope the young hero does not disdain it." Saying so, he handed over a small packet of tea leaves. Duan Yun accepted the gift and said, "That's very kind of you." Afterward, the three of them left. Duan Yun actually understood their intention. It was merely to probe his reality and guess whether he might be scouting for a bandit's den. However, since they kept calling him Young Hero and presented a meeting gift, how could he possibly be upset? This was the second time Duan Yun was called Young Hero. He finally felt like he was truly traversing the martial world. Clearly seeing that Duan Yun was not lying, both parties remained at peace, and soon, the wilderness fell back into silence. Unlike the night he encountered the ghost in the red dress, at least there were other people around tonight, which greatly reduced the loneliness and fear one feels in the wilderness. At the end of the day, humans are social creatures who sometimes complain about the noise in the world, but if really left to live in complete isolation, Duan Yun admitted he couldn't do it. Just as before, after Duan Yun had his fill of food and drink, he practiced his stance for a while and then rested against a tree. Naturally, he wouldn't sleep deeply, but his sea of consciousness was empty and relaxed. Two mosquitoes unacquainted with good manners approached his chin, and instantly, two thin strands of sword chi appeared from his chin, slaying them. Through continuous practice during this time, his breaking body sword energy gradually integrated into his bodily instinct. Sometimes Duan Yun wondered whether, if his entire body emitted sword chi, would he qualify as a swordman? Suddenly, a booming thunderclap sounded. Duan Yun opened his eyes. Was it going to rain? Sheltering in the wilderness, rain was probably the most troublesome thing. Below, the people from the caravan, upon hearing the thunder, had already started moving. Those who had carts got on their carts, and those who had umbrellas took them out. Booming again, another streak of lightning fell, illuminating the vicinity in a flash of brightness. Someone in the caravan suddenly let out a strange yell. "Who's there?" Duan Yun looked toward the source of the sound, and couldn't help but feel his skin crawl. He saw 5 middle-aged men with sparse hair standing among the wild grass, the leader dressed in a vibrant red outfit with more than a dozen black holes on his head, 2 of which held thin, long metal flutes, giving off an exceptionally sinister vibe. They used the flutes on their heads aimed at the sky, mumbling words, sounding like whispering secrets or praying for a ritual. What is this? Fairies? Demons? Teletubbies? Until this moment, Duan Yun was utterly baffled. He knew the absurd martial world was about to get bizarre again. Chapter 20 is this big medicine too extreme? The lightning had vanished, and the surroundings once again became obscure and dim. 5 figures in red, their heads riddled with holes and thin iron flutes inserted, stood stock still, indistinguishable whether human or ghost. In this stormy night, they appeared utterly terrifying. Having encountered the fairy of Red House and the bear guarding the treasure, Duan Yun considered himself rather brave. Yet the scene tonight still filled him with dread, fear of the unknown, for he couldn't be sure whether these figures were actually human. What a world of surprises this is. Yes, who knows when these 5 Teletubbies arrived. If it weren't for that dazzling lightning, perhaps no one would have noticed them in the wild grass. They seemed as if they had always been there, unchanging through the ages, just like those weathered, forsaken statues along the road. With a boom, another bolt of lightning struck. The caravan had started to show signs of chaos, as the once stationary figures in red from the grass had now moved to the roadside. They moved. Judging by their postures, they hardly resembled people, but rather some kind of crawling reptilian creatures. The lightning cast their rough faces and those dark holes on their scalps into sharp relief, enough to make one's skin crawl. Seeing these strange people draw near, the members of the caravan had retreated towards Duan Yun. Then, suddenly, the caravan stopped, for these five had engaged in bizarre climbing again, moving at high speed, and had arrived in the space between Duan Yun and the caravan. That is to say, they had blocked the road. At this point, Duan Yun also couldn't help feeling tense, as these five were even closer to him now. The lame gray donkey edged backwards, looking terrified as though it had seen a ghost. Duan Yun stared intently at these five Teletubbies. In the faint light of the night, he could only make out the silhouettes of their bodies with antennas on their heads. During this time, the five figures stopped moving again, using the small iron flutes atop their heads to point at the sky, murmuring to themselves. Duan Yun even suspected they were casting a spell on him, and so, in silence, he extended his sword finger, thinking it best to strike first. Just then, a sound of light footsteps approached. "Take care, young man. Don't provoke them. They are madmen from the Thunder God and Mother sect." Duan Yun turned around and saw two robust men. At a glance, it was clear they were twin brothers, identical in appearance, with beards and short jackets on, giving off a trustworthy vibe. Indeed, upon seeing these two men, Duan Yun couldn't help but think of the hardy heroes of the martial world. Duan Yun asked with confusion, "Thunder God and Mother sect? Thunder God and Mother? What an odd-sounding name. Don't act recklessly. They are thunder listening. Once the thunder fades, they will leave," said the man on the left, sipping his drink as he spoke. Duan Yun had not expected that these people, with their heads full of deep holes and fine iron flutes inserted, were actually listening to thunder. Thunder listening? What a bizarre and peculiar hobby. With the presence of these two knowledgeable men, Duan Yun felt less panicked. The caravan people had also noticed the presence of these twin heroes and stealthily moved closer. These twin brothers were none other than the renowned medicine cultivators, Hua Wen and Hua Wu. Their reputation as wandering heroes with trustworthy faces had contributed to their success in cultivating big medicine. They had followed the scent to harvest Duan Yun's big medicine and unexpectedly encountered the people from the Thunder God and Mother sect. They didn't want big medicine to meet with any accidents, so they kindly warned Duan Yun. Boom! A peal of thunder crashed down. This time, being closer, Duan Yun could even see the iron flutes atop the heads of the Thunder God and Mother sect members vibrating. The sight gave him a headache. All of a sudden, one of the sect members moved, his iron flute quivering as he raved, "I've had a revelation." He himself was as skinny as a bag of bones, and now with bloodshot eyes, he appeared like a frenzied skinny monkey, especially eerie to behold. Duan Yun couldn't help but take 2 steps back, intending to shield everyone in front of him, only to find they retreated faster than he did. So he ended up still leading the way. Skinny, with a maniacal look on his face, suddenly turned and fixed his bloodshot eyes upon them. At that moment, everyone's scalp tingled. "I've had an epiphany. I've had an epiphany. Ah! I'll use you lot to test my skills." Saying so, he got down on all fours and scurried over like a lizard. The scene had an intense impact, resembling a ghoul leaping out in a horror movie. Just as he was approaching Duan Yun and the others, a bolt of lightning emerged from Skinny's hand, forming the shape of a whip. Skinny cackled wildly, about to lash at Duan Yun with the whip, but the next instant, his body shuddered, and the thunder whip in his hand went limp, failing to strike. It was because a beam of silvery white sword light had pierced through his skull. Duan Yun held his sword finger, his face tense. Skinny's face showed a hint of astonishment, and right then, he lifted his right hand again, attempting another lash. Swoosh! Another blade of sword light pierced through the center of his brows, and his body shook again. He tried to move again, but 2 more frosty sword lights came piercing through. In the blink of an eye, Skinny had 4 bloody holes through his head, looking exceptionally horrifying. What caused Duan Yun to sweat was, this guy wasn't dead yet, still struggling to whip him. Swoosh! Duan Yun unleashed his sword finger again. This time, the sword light shot directly through the opponent's chest. At this point, Skinny finally began to stagger. With a face of shock and fury, he uttered, "Damn it!" before thudding to the ground, dead. Skinny had immersed himself in the sounds of the Thunder God and Mother sect for nearly a decade, and finally had his enlightenment tonight, realizing a miraculous thunder whip technique. Overjoyed, he merely wanted to whip a few people to death to test his method, just for some fun. Yet, this whip, he never got to unleash it before he died. That was more painful than death itself. So he died, his eyes wide open with rancor. The surroundings suddenly returned to silence, with only the rumbling thunder remaining. The change was so abrupt and sudden. Not to mention the merchant caravan folks. Even the medicine cultivators Hua Wan and Hua Wu were startled. How could this hero using the sword finger be so ferocious? Even more ferocious than them. Duan Yun then looked over and asked, "I didn't do anything. Why did this person suddenly turn violent?" Hua Wu swallowed hard and explained, "These strange people, when they get too absorbed in listening to thunder, they go mad and attack. Otherwise, they wouldn't be called thunder maniacs." "Is that so?" At that moment, two of the sitting thunder maniacs suddenly stood up. Without another word, Duan Yun raised his hand and pointed 4 sword fingers at the 4 thunder maniacs. 4 beams of sword light accurately pierced through the hearts of the 4 thunder maniacs from the Thunder God and Mother sect, and they fell back dead. Duan Yun looked at the 5 fresh corpses and took a long breath of relief. Alright, there's no fear of them going crazy suddenly. That really scared the hell out of me just now. Seeing this, the medicine cultivators Hua Wan and Hua Wu couldn't help but have their hairs stand on end, their temples throbbing. Isn't this hero of theirs a bit too extreme?